Mary.
I don't care.
No, I know, I just.
Actually, you know what?
It's close, but
do you mind if I take this and just
Yeah.
write down the vacuum?
Yeah.
And I'll bring it over when I get over.
Perfect.
Do you have a
Thank you.
username
He
and
didn't
password to
come
get in, or will it just come
There's some
back
sick
up?
stuff going
It
on.
might not.
No, Thursday. When's the last time you heard from Jeff?
Why went-
Riveting information on there, so have a good time with that.
Well,
Last Thursday.
Friday morning at like 4 in the morning.
Oh, really?
But I saw him Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah.
All right.
Shall we go ahead and get started? We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Roll call, Mary.
Here.
Diana.
Here.
Leah.
Yep.
Peter.
Here.
Stephen. Here. And Jeff and Blaine. Do we know where Blaine is?
Blaine has got a soccer.
Oh, okay.
He thought it was going to be canceled because of the weather, but it wasn't.
Okay. I am also here. Meeting has been properly noticed and certified.
Yes, it has been.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Leah, seconded by Peter. Any questions on the agenda? Questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Motion by Leah, seconded by Peter. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Oath of office, Danny Michaels and Michelle Dunn. Leah, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. If you guys want to go, I guess that's the only microphone we have.
And did you both get a copy of the oath? You did. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
You guys get to talk, I should stand here like this.
Because I don't have a copy.
Okay, go ahead.
I, Danny Michaels, having been elected to the office of Board of Education of the Mount Horeb Area School District, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability, so help me God.
I, Michelle Dunn, having been elected to the office of Board of Education of the Mount Horeb Area School District, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Welcome both.
Good job, Danny.
I guess moving on. It's quick.
I apologize, I have the giggles tonight, and I can't help it.
Approval of the April 6th regular and executive session meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion by Peter, seconded by Diana. Any question on those?
I'm sorry, who made the first motion?
Peter and Diana.
Any questions or comments on those minutes? No? Okay. Motion by Peter, seconded by Diana to approve. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Okay. Addressing the board, school news.
I would like to start by thanking Dan for his 6 years of service to the school district and
Thank you.
community.
Thank you.
Being a board member, which, you know, has ups and downs. And
Yeah, well, it's been 6 years, hard to believe, and it certainly has had its ups and downs, but it's been highly rewarding. It's been humbling and a pleasure to work with all of you and all the other staff members that aren't here tonight. Certainly, the district has had its challenges, but overall, I think, I know that this is just a fantastic place, and it's because of the people that are here. And so, thank you for allowing me to serve. Again, it's been a pleasure.
And I would also like to thank Steve for being willing to fill in when after Keith's resignation. Like I said, there's ups and downs with it, and there's a lot of challenges and a large time commitment. So So, thank you.
Any other school news?
Yes, actually, I have several things. The future problem solvers, they came to go to their weekend conference, the State Bowl. They came a few meetings ago to request permission to do that. And we had a sixth grader, Allie Gundrum, took first place in the junior division as an individual competitor. So they will be coming back to get permission to go to Ames, Iowa in June to be a part of that competition. So they will be coming back for board approval for that as well. Nick Cassidy took third place in the middle division as an individual competitor, and the ninth grade boys team took second place for their skit presentation. So kind of a good competition for all of them. On Sunday, April 12th, we are one of the few conferences that do this. We honor our top students as a conference. So instead of always concentrating on athletics, which a lot of us think of when you think of your Badger Conference, this was to honor our top students. Blaine happened to be one of the top 10 students that were honored that day, and it's held on a Sunday afternoon at the Chula Vista, and all the Badger Conference schools are there, represented by all of their top students. So it's really quite a nice banquet and quite an honor. Very kind of a formal occasion. So I'll pass it around so you can kind of see all the other districts that are in there. One more thing. We are starting, I'm on the Rotary Club in town, and there's an Interact Club, which is a student Rotarian club, and we have had a number of our students, especially seniors, and Blaine's been one that's been kind of involved. They really wanted to get a student Rotary Club started to do community projects with kind of in conjunction and some on their own. And we are just getting that up and running. We had our first meeting last week, and we are meeting this Thursday morning too, and they want to do like some service projects. So it's like 25 kids are interested. So I'm excited about that. I'm actually the school advisor as well as Rotary advisor for that.
Excellent. Any other school news?
Nope, that's it for me.
Any other administrators have any school news? Okay. Do we have any citizens' comments? Citizens' comments? Going once, going twice? Citizens' comments? Okay. Personnel transactions.
Just one page?
But
Just the one page that was in the...
yep, that's it. What you received on Friday with everything else.
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion by Diana, seconded by Stephen. Any questions, comments? Questions, comments?
1D, what is that? What do we approve if we vote on that? That's really a two-part question.
That is similar to what we had this year with that staff member, where they did a job sharing, 50%. So we'd have to advertise like we did last spring for another person to do that. And it worked out great this year.
No, I'm not against it, but there's two questions there. I just want to know, make sure we're clear on which one we're approving.
Oh, well, the original request would be the job share, and if the board doesn't agree with that, it'd be a leave of absence.
And the person that did the other 50% this year is not going to be available?
No, she is not available.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion by Diana, seconded by Stephen. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Right. Consent agenda. Are there any reports anyone would like to have pulled out?
I have a question about the fitness center. I mean, since it's on a financial one, maybe we can pull it out for
Okay,
that.
pull out finance. All right. Any other reports that need to be pulled out? Okay. Do we have a motion for, okay, A, C, and D?
Second.
A, C, and D, motion by Diana, seconded by Peter. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So then 7B, Peter, financial report.
So,
D.
I read,
Or D, I'm sorry, the finance report.
I saw we stayed under the number, but I'm just curious, and I know we took a stance against it 2 years ago, but I just noticed that there's the naming rights on the fitness center. How did that, I don't remember that being in the original discussion.
You mean the thing on the outside?
Yeah.
I guess I didn't know it until I saw it out there too myself, but.
Do you know it?
I'm familiar with it.
Mhm.
I was not aware that a name was going to be put on the exterior, or anywhere on the addition.
Right, because just from a history point of view, that was brought up a few years ago as a source of revenue, and we took it was a long discussion against doing such a thing, so I don't know where that fell into the discussion, or if that was not part, because I don't remember it being part of the original one, so I just wanted some clarification.
And like I said, I wasn't aware of it until I saw it last week when Bruce and I were out there.
Did anyone from the district approve it?
Not that I mean, it probably would have been Scott or I, and we didn't.
Do you remember what policy number that is? Does anybody?
The advertising policy?
The naming rights policy. And there was a policy that we put into place as a result of that.
I think it's in the advertising policy.
I think it's just part of the advertising
I think it's
policy,
in
but
Series 800 or 700, it's not for-
I don't think it's a separate policy.
I guess I don't make an argument one way against it at
No.
this point, but it's kind of,
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was part of the original, or a stipulation thereof, so I don't know why that, I don't know if it was a stipulation or not, I don't know, I'm just kind of.
I don't think it was
was
originally,
not.
but.
It wasn't in any of the drawings.
So the bigger question is, where do we go from here, or do we do anything? That's kind of where I'm at, because it really does set a precedent that potentially,
It'd be neat to have the, other contributors recognized as well.
right?
And we are going to put a board inside, which we were talking about before I even saw that was on the outside, that, recognizing, because we've had so many people donate, very significant amounts of money to help pay for some of the other items. So we are going to do that. It's just a matter of figuring out what that might look like, but.
And we do things like that outside the auxiliary gym,
Oh, yeah.
some other stuff.
Yeah, outside the main gym, there's one on the speaker system.
But an actual section of, an actual building being named after somebody, or a section thereof, is where I'm questioning. So that's where I'm kind of at.
Do we in general give recognition to donations?
Well, like that, if you look outside the gym door, there's a plaque showing who donated what towards the sound system in the
No.
gym.
Someone brought it to my attention that apparently there were some donations made for some scoreboards, and there's no recognition for that. And there is recognition for like the sound system and stuff like that. So do we in general do it, or do it on case-by-case basis, or how does that work?
That I don't know, because this is really the first time I've been involved with it. I don't know, Scott, do you know, like historically, if that's been kind of, if there were donations, they'd kind of go through the finance committee, but has there been kind of a policy to recognize in general, or?
Well, I think it was Dr. Anderson's initiative to work with the group of people that were involved with the donation to make that happen. I wasn't actively involved in those discussions, but I know that was an initiative that he tried to take when donations were received.
The scoreboard specifically, if it's the ones I'm recalling that just last year, Mike Baranek brought those, but I believe those were paid for out of
That was district
funds.
yeah.
So I mean, going way back, I know that Pepsi-Cola donated scoreboards, but their name was on the scoreboards for the duration of those scoreboards being used.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I don't know.
Yeah,
That
I
sounds
guess I
like-
wasn't aware that any donations had been made to any other scoreboards besides the Pepsi ones, but.
And I guess I'm not sure. It was just brought to me by some parents that supposedly a donation was made for the scoreboards, and there were no recognition.
So it sounds like some sort of policy, or maybe not policy, but documented response for
Yeah.
donation should be made.
So where do we go with the, essentially naming rights of the building? That's kind of where my question is really geared at.
Well, it's the district's building, and so in regard to that nameplate, I'm surprised that nobody in the district knew about it. But it is district property, and so that could be removed. It could be changed to include other donors and also the year perhaps that it was built. Or it could be just left as it is. Really, that's the prerogative of the board and the district to decide what to do with that.
Is it a nameplate?
It's a concrete block, so they cut the brick out and they slid the block into place.
Okay. That's what I thought from what I've seen, but I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. But really, it's up to the board to decide what to do with it. You know, if you want to change it.
So I don't know, was anybody else thoughts on that, or was everybody kind of where I was, not knowing that was going to be part of that?
I had no idea.
I have no clue.
I didn't either.
I think
so.
it could be construed that the whole building, because it's just a part of a building, that because it's on the outside, you could think that the entire building was donated.
So, you're right, and there really were 3 groups that provided the funding for that, so really, there's one over the other, so kind of, should have been part of the original discussion, not necessarily knowing it would change the outcome, but it should have been part of the original discussion.
There was in the original discussion, if you go back and look at your minutes, there was a discussion about naming that fitness center, but that would be addressed upon its completion.
Okay.
So, you know, and the thing is, it's placed in the same spot where we were considering putting up that Viking logo. So if the logo, now I know that you and I had talked about perhaps different spots, and then Jeff and Gary had talked about yet a different spot, so that's for you guys to figure out. But if it goes in that original spot, well, it will be covered up. So really, that's up to you guys. I don't want to not have an opinion on it, but I'm not going to have an opinion on it, so.
Right. So I guess as the board change, maybe we can have it on another agenda or talk about it, so
Yeah.
let's wrap that up or come to some resolution.
Because I don't think we can technically make any motions on it now, because it's not officially on the agenda.
Right, that's why I pulled
Yeah.
the finance
Yeah.
up, so at least we can talk about it. but-
Anything else on the finance committee report?
So are we saying it's on the next agenda? I just want to be clear about that.
It's a futures item. right?
Futures item, and I like to address it obviously sooner than later,
Mm-hmm.
or time will pass and.
Deb, I'm not
Accepted.
keeping track of futures, just so
Okay.
you know.
I think it's a good
Jackie and I will.
conversation for us to have. I think when the advertising, when we discussed that policy, which for people's knowledge, it's policy 851, there were a lot of people who came to our board meeting, as I recall, who were pretty passionate about advertising in our schools. And I think there are probably going to be people that we will hear from, since we have a policy about that, and the policy was clearly not followed, that we need to have a response to.
Okay, anything else on the finance report?
Thank you.
Yep.
There's no other spot to bring it up.
Okay, 8A, report on the student trip to Paris. Madam Crier.
We have to approve the.
Oh, we have to, I'm sorry. I'm jumping the gun here.
Motion
Motion to
Second.
approve.
Oh, did we not?
We did.
Peter and Leah?
Yep.
I've been pretty good at that lately. All right, motion to approve by Peter, seconded by, and I wrote Diana.
Okay.
I said Leah and wrote Diana. Okay, so, motion by Peter, seconded by Leah. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Now, Madam Crier.
Okay. I'm Rebecca Pryor, French teacher here, and I'm happy to say that one of my students who's on the trip is here. Please feel free to ask Cole. Cole, what's your opinion?
I don't know, I really liked it. It's cool, you get to see a lot of museums and all that stuff. I thought it was like definitely worth going on.
So Stacy Meister, Barb Hutch, Anita Loves, and I took 16 of our current students, 8th, 9th, and 10th graders went. We took 2 former students, returning students of their college kids who I had in the past, who wanted to go, one again, and one had never gone and felt he needed to go. And we took 2 wonderful grandmas and 4 moms. and we all had a marvelous time. You can look on the things we did, front and back. We never do everything on the list, due to weather and all kinds of things. 3 of the items on the list we actually did not do. But in our hotel, there was a little Christian school, I think from Tennessee there, university. They did 3 of those items in 3 days. So you can imagine we were galloping around Paris at high speed. The kids always say, Madam Claire, can we stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning? And I say, sure, no problem, but they're always begging to go back to the hotel. Is that not true, Cole?
It's pretty true.
They're begging to go back to the hotel. Nobody wants to stay out that late. We saw the town from top to bottom. One of the really exciting things we got to do was visit the Fondation Louis Vuitton, which opened in November. Phenomenal. Frank Gehry is the architect, and it's the hot thing in architecture right now, and modern art museums. So we went out there and had a very good time seeing that. We got the kids into 3 really interesting ethnic neighborhoods, which we don't usually visit. And we were delighted to locate the only Packer bar in Paris. They all did have their picture taken there. Nobody had any alcohol, don't worry. But the guy assured us whenever there's a Packer game, the place is packed with all Wisconsin people living in Paris, and they even fly in from Wisconsin to be at his bar to watch the game there. We had a lot of fun on this trip. Paris is really interesting. I thought I'd get a lot of comments from parents about safety after the January 7th attack. I heard from nobody, which was really a surprise. But a lot of Parisians talked to me about it. They're on their highest vigilance, Vigipirate. They have 2 levels on their highest level, at least into the summer. And literally, I've never seen Paris so clean. There was not a gypsy in town. There was not a pickpocket. There was no street theater practically. We saw one little event which was very much under the control of the local mayor. But the city was very clean, and there were 10,400 military police called in. They were gorgeous and beautifully done up, lots of guns. And there were 5,000 to 6,000 police on hand, as well as the Foreign Legion. So we felt very safe. And it was a different feeling to the city, it really was. I mean, some of the charm was gone, actually, but there were police and guns everywhere. And that was quite an interesting thing for us to see. The thing I really want to talk to the board about is kid behavior, and this is a huge issue for me because I've lived abroad a lot of my life, and I have a son who's military, and he and I are always very concerned about how Americans behave abroad. And we get very upset when we see people who don't behave abroad, and I just want to tell you how absolutely wonderful these kids were. I mean, absolutely wonderful. Of course, I do threaten them with their lives. You're worried about bullying. I suppose I'm guilty of it. Did I talk about decapitation ever, Cole, or anything like that? Maybe not, but I threatened.
It was probably in there somewhere.
It was in there somewhere. I tell them, you will behave. You know, this isn't your right to go abroad. This is a privilege to have this passport, and we're living in a really tough time right now. And when you offer that pregnant lady with groceries and 3 kids your seat on the metro, she doesn't like you, she likes America. And you've got to be aware of the impact of what you do when you're in a foreign country. If you cut up, they hate all of us. It's not fair, but that's the way we all react. And our kids were wonderful. We stopped at one little sandwich place and just to get quiche and sandwiches. And the ladies who worked there called me over and said, well, you're the teacher. What wonderful kids. And she gave me a whole bag of these little chouquette, little pastries for the kids, because she said, they're just so sweet and wonderful. I want your kids each to have a pastry from us. The French don't do that. I mean, this never happens there. This is the kind of greeting that our kids get when they're over there because their behavior is exemplary. They're really, really great. And I think the thanks go to their parents, obviously. The school factors in a little bit as well. But it's just a pleasure to take these kids abroad. This is probably my 12th trip for Mount Horeb. And every single time, this is the kind of greeting that we get from people on that end. They're so happy with the behavior of our kids. On the way back, I got hunted down by the head stewardess from American Airlines. Is this a school group? I thought, oh God, now what happened? Yes, who's in charge? Me, I'm the one in charge. And she said, I just have to thank you for these incredibly well-behaved kids. Everybody on the airplane was talking about how well-behaved they are. It's just please and thank you all the time, and they were just delightful. So, you know, I think that needs to come to your attention, and I think that needs to be a critical part of every trip we take kids on, because the world is in kind of a tough situation right now. We have to be aware of safety, but we have to make sure our kids are really presenting the best face America has to present, and these kids absolutely did that, including you, Cole. Thumbs up, guys. So that's my little spiel. To Phil, too. He'll have the same thing to say, I'm sure. So about Spain.
Well, thank you for that report. Hearing you talk about the changes there is a little disheartening, just because I've been over there twice, and just picturing it in my head is, it's too bad, but you're right, it's the world we live in. So, any questions for Madam Pryor?
I would just like to commend her on these trips. I actually met her over there twice on 2 of the Paris trips. And she's just an endless source of knowledge and stories about Paris, because she lived over there for many years. I think she does a great job in giving students the freedom to explore. They're under supervision, but they really get to explore, one of the great cities of the world, and learn about, the culture. We always say we're a melting pot here in the U.S., but Paris is definitely also a melting pot. They have people there from all over the world. So it really is a great experience for the students, and she just does a wonderful job of getting them to see all the historical sites, modern sites, the culture, and stuff like that. So I think it's really well done.
And hopefully when I retire, these trips will go on. I don't know how it would work, Steve, but, the kids need this desperately.
Yes,
to get out.
yes.
I went with Mike Woolley my first time over there.
Yeah.
Great trip. Got hit by a guy with a hockey stick, so that was kind of a down part of the trip, but otherwise it was very good. All right, thank you again. Let's see here, where were we? The 8B, board reorganization.
And we included the agenda, actually it will be at 7 o'clock, not 6:30, but what we have used in the past, just as a reference, and that will take place at the next board meeting at 7 o'clock. So it's more kind of as a guide for you to be thinking about, and those are kind of areas. The one thing on page 3, the committees with the board representatives, some of those, I think the last time around we didn't necessarily fill with board members. We don't have to, but so those are kind of areas where that might not, we might not want, depending on who wants to be involved with some of those. But so if there's anything we want to change or do differently, you can consider it from now until the next board meeting.
Well, also the building liaisons, I think that has been neglected a little bit, and maybe neglected is not the right word, but it's been not, I don't know that there's been frequent meetings with the buildings. Maybe there has been. But I just, from what it sounded like, there were a few buildings that hadn't seen.
I've gone to the 4K meetings.
Oh, have you? Okay, good. Okay. I'm not singling you out, Diana. So,
I just wanted
anyway.
Sarah runs a great meeting, so I wanted to
Sarah,
to be
can you
known
vouch
that
for
Sarah
her?
is running meetings and inviting board members to them, so.
So were there questions on the reorganization?
I have 2 questions. One is number 9, the committees with a single board representative. Are those
Yeah.
still active? And
They become more district committees. I think at one time, like last time, I know the Human Growth and Development, I was asked, does a board member have to be on? And I said, no, they don't have to. It comes back to the full board. So I think in those cases, it was chosen not to fill those last time, but that's kind of by board.
Okay.
So I think it depends on the board and what they want to do with that. So we will keep it in, but if there's a feeling that, that there doesn't need to be representation by the board on those, that's fine too.
And then did admin team look at that to see if there are any other committees that they would consider or want to consider or not? Like I think the
No.
wellness, it's not wellness because that's what our committee is now, but there was an allergy policy or there was a bunch of.
These are really board committees, not necessarily just school or district committees.
So the single board rep one, like gender
That would
equity?
be,
Like I was thinking if there's any others. I don't
others
know.
that could be added.
And I'm not lobbying to
Yeah.
have
And-
more board in there. I guess
yeah.
I'm lobbying that
I can
admin
take that.
team see if they
yeah.
want any other
Yeah,
ones.
I'll take that to admin this week and see if they feel like these are still valid, or if there's other ones we should substitute, or, make some modifications in.
And I guess I would also ask what is their preference to have a board member on there or not on there? I'd like to know what admin team feels about having someone on there. Or can it be that those committees report to one of our committees that we are on, like education or wellness?
Well, because like co-curricular doesn't have anything on here, but we've had co-curricular committee meetings. So I don't know if that's one we need to add, or if it's just.
Or if it was like a one and done, like we reviewed it and we moved, it's almost like an
Right.
action team, not a committee or a task force or something. And then my other question is just, Stephen and Dan, you won't be here at the next meeting when we reorganize, so if we wanted your input, this would be the time for you to give input if you have any. It felt to me like this is the only opportunity that we as standing board will hear. So I guess I'd welcome any input that you have from your experience on the board.
Input specific to the reorganization.
Yeah, if you have ideas about what would make sense, if you have thoughts about, the best way to move forward doing this work. I mean, I've only done it twice in terms of having new people come on to the board. And one of those I was new, so I'm just curious what might help.
I think what makes this board as effective as it has been is that we all don't agree. There's times when we agree, there's times we don't disagree, and we have the willingness and ability to move forward and have constructive discussions. So as far as the reorganization goes, I won't share my opinion of who should be in what position, according to me, because it doesn't matter, I'll be gone. But I have every confidence that as a board, you guys will do great. Just because of that ability to politely disagree when necessary or agree when you do. As far as the actual reorganization goes, the reason I brought up the building liaisons is because that's something that, and you kind of touched on some of those other ones. Are they necessary to appoint if we keep the building liaisons? There are a couple buildings that haven't seen their liaison this year. And so is that something the board wants to commit to? If so, then is there an ability to make sure that those individuals are going to be in those buildings every 6 weeks, or I don't know, whatever the time frame is? That would be the only other thing I'd offer.
I thought admin came back and said they wanted to just let us know when they wanted us in the building.
It depends who you talk to.
I thought that came up at our board meeting.
So that's a discussion you should have. There's also times where you're going to have staff members, and we've heard it recently, staff members that say, we never see board members. They want to see us. And then there's times that they don't want to see us. I'll give you that. But, it's not to go, shake up anything when you go into a building, but I think it is a good thing to go in and see how the building operates on a day-to-day basis. Stephen?
Well, I kind of agree with Dan. I think obviously, my tenure on the board has been somewhat limited, but, I think there's obviously been disagreements, but there's also been civility on here, and that's really required for a functioning board. If you don't have civility on there, then you really can't get anything accomplished. I also think, and I've tried to do it, go to especially the high school where we all know there have been some issues there. We're going to go there and talk to people, and if nothing else, be a sounding board and take the heat. People, if they're not happy on something, they want to express their opinions. And I've been over, especially at the high school, like I said, numerous times, just to act as a sounding board, and I think it's important to continue that. You me, as an individual board member, obviously you can't, I have no authority except what's vested in the board, but nonetheless, people still want to express their opinions. I think that makes a big difference.
Last thing I'll throw out there is, we have, since Deb's come into the district, and we've brought some new administrators, and there's been job changes, is that, a lot of the pressures that hopefully we've had in the last few years will become diminished because, Deb's not new anymore. And a lot of those things, as far as being able to say, what, that's not our position, that's for the administration. I think that's something good to keep in mind as well. So, I don't know if that helps you guys at all, but.
And just a final comment, this is kind of my personal view. I think the board's role in, especially the day-to-day administration of the district, should be as limited as possible. We are a board. We are not the managers of the district. The administration are the managers of the district, and we supervise the superintendent. And I think, anything the board does, we need to keep that in mind. If we have, for whatever reason, the need to micromanage the district, then something's not right.
Okay. Anything else on that, anyone?
Thank you.
Okay, yep. 8C, budget planning process. Peter, I think you had asked for this, correct?
Correct. Before I start, and I have a list here, but I want us to kind of remember, it's always easy to say no, or we're mired in such tradition that throughout the word, we've always done it this way. And I appreciate all the work that's been done in the budgets in the past, but I think we're almost to a tipping point where we need to start looking at it differently. Instead of a two-dimensional piece of paper, which traditionalism has forced us to look at, we need to start looking at different ways, which means what ways can we change our revenue, or way can we get different revenue streams in? And I have a list of a few things, and I'm not saying they're right or wrong. Well, what I'm saying is we need to start expanding the way we think about things a little bit. So just kind of keep that in mind as I kind of go through a few of these things. And I don't want to necessarily debate the merits of them being right or wrong, but I want us to be able to send or think about some of this stuff and maybe start thinking about the way we can increase our profits or our money-making abilities. So when I jotted down some of these list of ideas, like I said, don't necessarily argue one way or the other, but it's different thoughts. We need to start thinking beyond our traditional mindset of what we've done for traditional funding. So I think whether you like Governor Walker or not, charter schools are a thing that are going to come to the future. So we should probably start asking ourselves, is there a way to take advantage of that funding or charter schools? Two thoughts I had on that is, one, we have a large population of homeschoolers in our district. Is there a way we can meet with them and create such a charter school to tap into some of that student revenue? Todd Neschheim started a fantastic online program. Can we find more? And Jared, last meeting, came here and got some funding to do more online stuff. Can we see some of those things? Maybe we need to look at renovation of one of our existing buildings or changing space, maybe to the point where maintaining a district office is too expensive. Not saying it's right or wrong, but things to think about. Open enrollment, we had all the data from the last two surveys, but we really haven't asked the more difficult questions of why are people open enrolling out, and what changes can we make to keep students here? Maybe to the point where if we think about the way our food budget works, maybe we have other portions in our district that should start to looking to having independent budgets and to be self-sufficient. The two that I could think of would be, one would be the co-curriculars, find a way to get the co-curricular programs to be independent. Now, I know that would be a long, arduous process. The other one would be transportation. Those are two large pots. We're talking later about policy 830, but we should also incorporate into that. That's just one piece of our fees in our policy, but really taking a look at, and Steve brought it up last time, our fees and our fee structures and our co-curricular payment schedules. I think we need to find out more why we've been doing it that way and come up with more things that are equitable and fair. And speaking of equity, maybe it's time we look across all of our benefits from the district and making sure everybody's paying their fair share, whatever that is. The prime one would be the health insurance, the 88%. Maybe we need to look at continuing to maximize what assets we do have, because the hard part for us is we don't do our budgets the way you do at your house. When you approve a loan, you have physical assets, your house, your property. But when we do our budgets, we only look at revenues coming in as our asset. But what ways can we take what physical assets we have and leverage them for the most revenue? So like the garage space is a prime example of that one. Maybe it's time we really institute more of a central ordering process, which was brought up last time. But we could do it in coalition with other districts, and the same with our health insurance, different options like that for power, as well as health insurance, looking at more wellness initiatives and trying to drop the premiums on the far side instead of focusing so much on the short view. So those are just a few. I'm sure there's a lot more we could think about, and I can give this to Deb, but the point is I think we're to a tipping point where we need to start looking at that differently. And then the last bullet point in there is really starting to instill both either a longevity portion or get into place the way we're going to reimburse or for remuneration for our faculty now for a long-term planning process. And I think that will serve us better for a budgetary point of view down the road instead of ever waiting periodically to keep doing it. I know we have a meeting on Wednesday about that, but those are just a few ideas. And I'm not necessarily, like I said, one favor one way or the other, but we need to start expanding our traditional mindset. And that's kind of, I think, where we need to go or think about.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. But we're starting the budget process. It's going to be coming back in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to start having some more difficult conversations, or at least looking at things differently.
Certainly a good conversation to have, and some of those things, as you mentioned, have been voiced, but have not been discussed, if that makes sense. You know, they've been mentioned, but we've never really sat down and dissected it.
But then it stops right there. We haven't, and the idea can be bad, but if you don't vet it out or hash it out, you won't ever know if it's good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those, some of them, people are going to say, oh, I don't want to do it just because they'll throw out the sentence, we've always done it this way,
Mm-hmm.
instead of digging into it and saying, oh, well, maybe it is a better way, or digging in and finding out it's a really bad idea and we shouldn't be doing it.
How would you recommend the board move forward?
I think when we reorganize in a couple weeks, I think we really need to empower the finance committee to look at things differently, instead of that traditional mindset. I'm not saying that's not wrong, the way we've done it, but start to expand the way they're vested power to get more information. Because we've had 1 year of that committee structure that way.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of got over the infancy level of that, and now it's more of a toddler level, it's walking and moving forward. That would be a prime example. And some of that stuff may take years to get into place, but if we don't start talking about it now.
Well, 98% of the district's finances are pretty defined between tax, local tax levies, as well as through state contributions, through subsidies.
Well, you're 100% correct, but like the prime example is the homeschoolers.
Yeah.
If we created, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but the example is to increase the revenue, to bring more funds into the district.
Right.
Yeah.
But as far as what Scott is going to be able to work on, it's going to be historical. It's going to be that's how it needs to be done. Now, you're adding additional revenue streams or talking about them, and some of those we've touched on very superficially and some not so superficially, but like advertising, things that we've talked about at length, but have been unable to come to a real good conclusion on it.
Right.
So, but no, it seems like a reasonable conversation in the charter schools. I know Jared, I assume you probably kept all that stuff because you've got hours and hours and hours and hours into researching charter schools, so that's something that a future agenda item we could discuss.
Yeah, Deb can send out my crudely written hand notes, but we've got to start the conversation somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we could put these on the finance committee agenda for, I don't know, the next year or so, and just talk about each one and possible funding sources.
Because my guess is with a lot of this, it's going to come down to, we've always done it this way. We don't want to think about it differently. That's the simple out answer. But I think if we take some time and really honestly ask themselves some of these questions, it may be way to go, or it may not.
I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying, but one thing that I think we could do better is we could be more transparent about why we as board members are so concerned about finances, and why coming up with this list we've probably each had a way to kind of think about revenue in a different way, and I know our administrators have, right? The work that Teresa did with billing, bringing in
Right,
a
yeah.
ton of money, food service being highlighted among, and I hate to pull people out, because everyone has done what they can to get more out of the limited budgets we've had, and everyone hears about how school budgets and school financing is so strained, but it's complicated, and it's hard for us to make simple, and so therefore we often don't touch it until we have to make cuts. And then people say, why are you cutting anything? And to me, I don't know, when you talk about home budget, I need to know how much less I'm going to have next year. Right now, we don't know that, but we have a projection, right? 380,
374.
367 or whatever,
285,000.
Well, actually, when Scott put the actual numbers in, but if you just look at what we're losing for aid, it would be the per pupil adjustment aid.
357.
357.
Yeah.
And I don't think, see, again, like, I knew it was a lot, I didn't know how much, and I feel like we need to be very transparent about that. We knew that there was going to be a shortfall. We didn't know exactly the dollar figure, but we knew there was going to be less. Scott does a very good job of letting us know that. And we know that from any publication we all receive from the School Board Association, right? We knew that funding was going to be tight. So we're always looking to do that. And I feel like then when there are cuts that have to be made, right, those are the tough decisions, it's looked upon like, well, why didn't you think about that? Or how come we didn't think about that? And I guess I feel like we have to be vigilant about it 24/7, year-round. It is, to me, one of the biggest jobs on this board is to be vigilant about that. That being said, when tough decisions are made, cash in lieu would be an example of a really tough decision. It still is looked at like, why? You know, like, how come? And I don't know that we've done as good a job as we can do with being more transparent about that. And so I would like to just say, yes, it's important to bring in revenue, but it's also to think about how we're spending our current money. Because what % of our total budget is staffing? A lot.
84,
85.
The vast majority, right? So one of the things I would like us to think about in the future is thinking about how do we spend the money we have now? How do we leverage the resources we have? And a really tough decision is probably going to be, how many students do we have in each of our courses? I'd like us to start thinking about that. I'd like us to have an honest, real conversation about FTE for how many students. And I would never suggest, obviously, core classes, we need to have core classes. But how many electives do we have? And those are going to be really tough decisions. But they're really hard decisions as well at primary, where we know we may need another kindergarten teacher. I want to have those discussions now, rather than having them in September, when there are 25 kids in each K room, but yet we have an elective that has 10 to 12 kids in it and a half-time teacher. I mean, those are tough decisions that we have to make, but one of the things that I struggle with is how each of our buildings communicate with each other and how we communicate as a board about that. And one isn't a priority over another, it's just a matter of using the best, making the best decisions with the resources we have. So I would advocate, your ideas are good, but I think another step or another layer is to look at how we're currently spending. And I'd like to advocate that we have a policy put into place or consider one for class size limits. So if there's a class that doesn't have a certain number of kids in it, we have to think about that.
Don't we have that already?
Yeah, we have like a guidance on it.
We have guidance, but we don't have, it's not a policy on, and it's about limit for numbers, right? If I remember correctly, like kindergarten shouldn't be over 21, or it's
Yeah, but-
18 to 23 or something.
There's a range for most of the grade levels, but high school does have like a number, but it's dependent on the class and other circumstances, so. But there is some of that same language on that same policy. It's like underneath the ranges for the other grades.
Yeah.
Mary, you started out not talking about where we're spending, but that's where you finished.
Mhm.
And I think that makes a lot of sense, but you started out talking about being transparent.
Mhm.
And that's been a challenge that this board has had, and I actually talked to Deb a little bit about transparency earlier and the frustrations that I have as a board member.
in that we sit here and talk about it, you know, for hours and hours and hours, and Gary occasionally puts it in the paper. Good job. You know, it's in the minutes, it's you know, and yet when things happen, it seems to be a surprise for some people. And communication is one of those things that we've talked about since before, well before I was on the board. And it seems to be one of those things that we just can't seem to get our arms around. And so unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you, but you know, you ended on, we have to look at where we spend. Yeah, absolutely, we have to look at what Peter's saying, but I think you touched on something really critical. Because the cash in lieu, you know, the feedback that I've received from a number of people, I mean, I can't say anybody's called me to say they're happy about that decision. And yet, it's not a decision that we wanted to make, but we're trying to do what's right for the district and be proactive so that we aren't painted into a corner as soon as regulations come out for affordable health care. I mean, we're doing what we need to do as a district in that regard, regarding cash in lieu. The cost for staff members to be on health insurance versus cash in lieu, it costs us more. So it's not a decision that as a board or as a district we want to make. Again, we're doing it because we have to. Anyway, obviously this one is fresh in my memory because we just have been talking about it, but hopefully you guys don't lose sight of, you know, the transparency part.
One of the things I'd like to mention, you know, it seems like a lot of stuff that we're doing as a board is reactive. You know, we're always reacting to whatever the current emergency is. You know, we need to focus more, look further down the road. You know, have a 3-year plan or 5-year plan. You know, and we're starting to do some of that. You know, like looking at what the demographics are going to be in the future. You know, that's a real basic thing. You know, do we need a new high school in 5 years? Well, if we do, we better know that. You know, that shouldn't come as a surprise to us. And the same thing, you know, the number of teachers we need. Well, if we, you know, do a good demographic study, we should know. You know, okay, we may be off by, you know, one every once in a while, but, you know, needing a kindergarten teacher next year shouldn't be a surprise to us. So, you know, a lot of stuff we really need to look down the road, and then we won't always be in this reactive mode, trying to put out whatever fire is happening.
I couldn't agree more. And our lack of knowledge about that number is because of, I believe, the current governor not passing, or signing off on the budget today. Is that correct? Or did it happen? I'm looking at you because maybe it happened today and I haven't checked the news yet.
It's a proposal today.
And so a lot of it is that. I mean, there are things that we can't control. We can guess, but we can't control, right? But I agree with you. There are things that we can have control over, some really hard decisions. And to me, making those decisions proactively for everyone feels better than doing it in a reactionary way. Likewise, I mean, hours were spent on the decision. It was not a rash decision on any of our parts. We took Saturday time to have discussions about budgets. Every year we end up doing at least one Saturday where we all come together and have these long conversations. I can't imagine the amount of time you spent on personnel and Chris, and the amount, I mean, you think about the total amount of money that we spend just talking about what we're going to do. It's not that we're not trying to be proactive, but the end result always feels like, geez, we should have communicated just a little bit more in a little bit different way. So all that being said, I think there's a lot of work for us to do looking forward, and if there's a way to do it better and smarter and leaner, I think we have to do it.
Okay. Is that an agenda item you want sometime down the road? To continue this conversation, and I guess you had mentioned perhaps bringing it to finance.
I think Peter's exactly right. We should empower finance to do what finance needs to do.
We should empower all of our committees to
Absolutely.
do more.
Right.
And then be, yeah.
Okay.
And vet a lot of these issues even before it comes here.
I think education needs to look at number of students per class. They need to look at the enrollment policy piece and then bring it to the full board, in my opinion. So Jared can add that to the education committee.
And we approved at our last meeting the study, didn't we?
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Valerie did,
Sorry, I
so
cut you
that'll
off.
help too.
Yep.
With this, both of
It'll
those
help for the
conversations for
planning like
finance
that,
and
yeah.
education, so.
No, I like
This
to
be
have to.
appropriate discussion for the retreat. I see that's the next one.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
We could talk about the committees and
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a
Look again
tentative
at the
agenda in the
goals.
packet, but yeah, certainly you could add conversation about budget planning and transparency, or however you want to put it in there.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have we ever considered having staff members on our committees? Teachers on our committees?
On like finance?
Yeah, on finance or on education, have we ever, as regular members, to help with that information process?
I know technology we did, Jared, education,
Education for a stint we did.
why did that stop?
I think, if I'm right, teachers were, they just, they were invited to come, but they weren't told they had to come. It just kind of came for a while, and then
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges, now that you're saying that, one of the challenges was that some of the conversations or topics that come to education, or any committee for that matter, for an individual to have an opinion against it or for it, might not endear them to some of the other staff members. I think that was a
Well,
challenge that I had heard about.
One of the things that, the teachers have said is, Jared includes us or tells us when we need to be there when it's something that deals with our realm. Whether it's a science committee or, the last one, Christine Parley was at for TAG and, those kinds of things. And so they really felt like, if there's something that we need to come talk about, we'll make sure that they're there. And, I've done a pretty good job with that. I haven't had any complaints. If that's a complaint area, they can come tell me, and I would be happy to have them come talk. Not only that, but there's always citizen comment. They can come and join us for that piece too.
I guess I would like
I'm not
us.
saying I don't want
Yeah.
input, but I think we get a lot of input from them.
I would like us as a board, I know, I would like us to, as a board, to consider or at least consult with staff to ask if they would be interested in it, and if so, then I'd like us to commit funds to do that. I think it's one thing to say, show up, and granted, we're all, not making a ton of money either, but I think part of the problem is we expect a teacher to come, and it's at 7 o'clock at night, and they're not paid for that. And if we truly want voice from people and we truly want to be transparent, then I think it might be interesting to see if staff would be interested in attending, should they be compensated. Compensated as a co-curricular, they'd be compensated to have their voice present. I mean, I just think if we truly want to have it be where there's more transparency, and I don't have a strong feeling one way or another, I guess I'm throwing it out there because I'd like to hear from staff to see if they would like to be present. And while, yes, education has an agenda and we go through it and we try to stick to it, a lot of times there's things that come up. Finance is probably the same way. There are questions that come up. We're going to have M3 coming to a wellness meeting coming up here. Would they be interested in showing up? And I guess I'd like us to just kind of think about that. And maybe I put it out there, and perhaps Will and others have thoughts about that, and we can just kind of have it as a topic of discussion at our retreat, and talk about it at the retreat, is if there's any merit to floating that idea. Because I think what we talk about should not be a secret to staff. And I don't think you were suggesting that.
No.
But I do think that sometimes there could be a perception of that. And I just think we have to be transparent. So.
Anyone else? Okay. So you're going to add it to the board retreat agenda, and then finance is going to take up the budget discussion.
Yeah, so I put down committees or committee structure, I guess as an added item. Right now, we have new board member orientation, strategic planning discussion, and facility plan discussion. But I can add committee. Do we want to?
definitions. Let's look at roles and responsibilities or something.
Yeah, didn't we
have
talk
those.
about doing, the calendar, right? We talked
those
about doing a board
calendars,
calendar. And then we talked about each committee having their, I know we've been working on it in wellness, right? That kind of what are we doing in wellness and back mapping it. And didn't we talk about each school bringing their school plan or whatever?
Well, that I did share with all of you.
So like what was on the whiteboard at our last retreat by each committee and by each building,
Mhm.
right? So I think a review of those is what we talked about. That was my memory of the retreat, was that. I know it's foggy now. It seemed like a long time ago.
Okay, we're good? Of course, we just covered 8D. Anything else to add for 8D?
That's
I think
enough.
we've got it, yeah.
Can you, since you're not, you're not gonna be there, but you're technically not on the board anymore, who leads our meeting? Do you lead the meeting?
On the second, we'll have a new president that we identify.
No, you won't.
No, we
No,
won't
not
have,
yet.
that's why I'm wondering,
Meeting
should
is
we,
until the 4th.
can we do the reorg on the second? Does that make sense, or does that not make sense? I don't know, I'm just asking.
I think it
I
makes
won't be
sense to
here on
do
the
it then,
second,
doesn't it?
Yeah,
He
that's
won't be
right.
here on
Peter
the
won't be there.
Oh.
No, I'm technically on until the
Until the 26th, I guess.
26th.
Or
and then-
actually Sunday, the 20th.
And then the new board
Sixth,
members
yeah.
are
Yeah, Monday, the 27th.
Monday, the 27th.
Yeah, next Monday.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, Mary could certainly lead the meeting.
I was just curious, because it just occurred to me this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was the seated vice president. She-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on the board retreat agenda? I'll think about bringing you guys donuts.
Coffee with
Think
coffee
about it.
with
And not drinking coffee.
It's going to be 2 in the afternoon, though.
That didn't go well.
So we probably don't need to.
Oh, that's right, 2 in the
It's 2 in the
afternoon.
afternoon.
Okay, cookies then.
Yeah, brownies.
All right, 9A, consideration of the middle school Spanish trip. Mr. Wood, welcome.
Thank you. I thought you were bringing up cash and mood just because I was over here in the audience. I emailed out a PowerPoint just mainly with notes for me. I can just tell you what I know, or I can put it on the projector if you want me to. What would be better for you guys?
I have access to mine. Does everybody have access to?
Yep.
Okay, if you want to just talk us through it, that'd be great.
Sure, and I'm going to try to hit the highlights, and then if you guys have any questions at the end, you can ask me, and then you can refer back to this if you need it. I don't want to take tons of your time. So the idea is in spring break of next year, so 2016, I'm working on putting together a Spanish trip for next year's 7th and 8th graders, so the kids that are currently in 7th grade and 6th grade. The first question that comes up is why travel and why now? And every single year I've had people ask us if we're going to do a middle school trip, because the French trip does it, we do DC, and there's always interest. I've been asked at garage sales, I've been asked at parent-teacher conferences, but every year somebody asks it. We haven't done a middle school Spanish trip in like 10 years, and part of that was just Steve and I were not in the right position with our families and everything, and I kind of feel like where I am now, I've got school under control, my kids are a little older. It seems like a good time. Also, this is kind of the last thing we haven't done yet. We speak up to 95%, some days 100% Spanish in class. We have Spanish students coming into the district that people can host if they want to. And we still have hemorrhaging of Spanish students before they get to level 5. We have a whole bunch that started in the middle school with me, and then I keep hearing of all the people that have dropped out, and then we only have a class or 2 and 5. This is the last thing that I can think of for us to do here at the beginning, to kind of give them, here's what you're going for, here's your end goal. Because in little tiny Mount Horeb, Spanish class becomes mostly a bunch of code words to share with your friends and make fun of your parents. It's, you have to speak Spanish or shut up. Some kids just choose not to speak for 45 minutes, and then you're back into English as soon as you leave the room. This gives us a chance to connect what we're doing in class to real life. And some people, because of where their parents live, or because they go to they're in Madison a lot, or where their parents work, already are connected, but this is just one more thing that we haven't done yet. So I feel like it's kind of the right time to start doing it, because we're seeing more of that. We're seeing more kids just very resistant, because in Mount Horeb they don't need Spanish. And by the time they figure out that they need it, they're going to be 30-something, and it's going to be too late to really acquire it for what they want. So the educational piece of it would be to align what we do in class to what they're seeing in Spain. And that is more true in my class because I have a lot of Spanish experience. I go over there fairly often. That's where I studied. So they see it in my classroom, they hear it in my Spanish. And the biggest thing is to just show them that this is something people use. This is people actually exist in the world that don't speak English. That's a huge thing for some students. To show them a different culture and the foods that go with that, and just kind of get them ready to, here's something new, here's a new experience, here's a new culture, how are you going to approach it? Because some of these kids, especially 7th grade, some of these kids haven't learned that yet. So I'm on the YEF. We're going with this company called EF. My contact there is out of Denver. I actually went through 4 or 5 different companies trying to figure out what would be the best fit for us. I went with EF because it has a decent coverage plan. If for whatever reason the trip can't go or if a kid's sick, they don't just take the money and run. Also, it is a proven, it's an established itinerary, it's a proven trip. They've done this before, and it is not something, a lot of groups are like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do with the kids when you're over there? And this is going to be more, we have a bus that will take us from point A to point B to point C, and I can throw in the information I have as we go. But I think especially with this first trip, middle school parents are going to be concerned with safety and knowing that their little tiny middle schoolers are going to be okay. And so to know that we have our own bus, we're not taking public transportation, the trip is already established, is going to help. There is a full-time bilingual tour director on with us. One thing that isn't on the slide that's worth mentioning is that one thing that EF does to help bring down its cost, we will not be the only American group on the bus. We will be our own group. We don't do everything all together with them. We are our own entity, but to save on transport costs, there are other people doing this itinerary to the same cities who will be on the bus with us from different parts of the U.S. And they work very hard to match us up with other groups that are comparable, so they're not going to throw us in with 30 seniors from the East Coast or something. It's as cheap as we could get it, which I know for Spain, the price is going to turn some people off, and we'll get to that in a minute. But just going to Spain, the plane ticket is $1,500–1,600. So there's a limit of what we can do, but this is the best value that I found. All the organizing and planning is done. They also, the leader to student ratio is 6, so if we have 12 kids, we'll have 2 chaperones. We have 6 to 12, we get me. But one thing that I liked about this trip is that they have a special leader preparation program. So before we would go, they would take me and show me, this is how we do things, these are the people you contact. So I have a lot of Spain experience, but then I would also have a lot of experience with them. So that's some things I liked about this group. I have heard from other teachers that have used it. We haven't, to the best of my knowledge, we haven't done it, at least we haven't done it in a while in this district. But I have heard of, talked to other teachers that have used it and said that it worked great. So that's why that particular company. A real quick overview of the itinerary, and you've got the picture of Spain on there. We fly in on day 1, day 2, 3, and 4 are in Madrid. They start by taking us around and showing us the hot spots, the museums, the Royal Palace and everything. Day 4, we had the option of going to Segovia, which is where the aqueduct is, which is beautiful and totally worth visiting. But I'm actually working on setting up through the company and family that does our host students. We didn't really feel, me personally, didn't really feel like middle schoolers are really ready for homestays. Lots of companies want to do that because it brings down their costs. And I just think telling somebody your 11-year-old or whatever is going to go stay with somebody for 3-4 nights is going to be a turnoff. But at the same point, if we're in Spain, we need to connect with Spaniards. I mean, they have to have faces with this. So Carissa in International Friendship and Communication, she's been doing, we've been, I don't know, 6 years, 7 years now, we've been bringing Spaniards over and people have hosted them. She will be hooking us up with some of those families who will come and meet us, and we'll hang out for the day touring Madrid with Spanish students, with Spanish families, and kind of getting the homegrown tour of Spain, so that they can still put some connection pieces in there, get to know some people without necessarily having to be on their own. So then after Madrid, then we would go to Granada, which is just this gorgeous city with this giant castle city. It was the last place that the Moors were in before they were kicked out during the Reconquest. On our way to Granada, we stop in Tokyo. My brain is in Toledo. We stop in Toledo, and small city. The old part of town is easily walkable. It has one of the most beautiful cathedrals in the country. Rather small. It's also got most of its original fortifications. The portcullis over the bridge and everything. So the guys geek out. It was a center of culture under the Moors, and very well known for steel and jewelry work. Really not worth spending a whole day there, so we'll stop there on our way through, so it'll be a nice trip out of the bus before we have to go all the way to Granada. Then after we get to Granada, we see the Alhambra, we see the city, then we head over to Sevilla, third largest cathedral in the world, where Christopher Columbus set out from. Lots and lots of history, very, very pretty city. We added the flamenco show in the evening. It was a slightly more expensive option, but that way we have somewhere to be in the evening that doesn't require us being out and about. After Sevilla, we're going to Costa del Sol, which is along the beach. And so day 8 is interesting, because if you look at their website, if you look at what they have, your option is to hang out at the beach or go to Morocco, and I don't like either of those options. If we're going to spend this money to go overseas, we should not be going to the beach. Kids can go zip lining, they can go on all these fun touristy things on their own. So we're working with EF. They have a language school in the nearby city of Malaga, and we're working with them to go to Malaga and meet up with the school, meet up with more Spanish students, maybe see Malaga and turn that, what was going to be just kind of a throwaway day, into another connection point. So we'll have a connection point at the beginning and at the end of the trip. Day 9, we had the Gibraltar trip. It's technically not owned by Spain, but it's worth going to if you're that close. There's a lot of Spanish history there. And then we'd spend that evening back at the same hotel. Day 10, we leave for home. A lot of monologuing. Any questions on the itinerary?
Can we come?
Every single staff member that I've told, every single one, as soon as they find out we're doing this, goes, do you need a chaperone? I'm at, I think, 29.
So is this a no?
We'll get to where adults can pay to go in just a minute.
Okay.
So the parents are responsible for the cost of the trip. The one cost that I don't have that's still floating around that bugs me a little bit is the cost of transport from here to Milwaukee. I do have a couple calls out to figure out what that would be, but that's also a little dependent on the numbers, how big of a vehicle we would need, depending on how many people would come. So I'm holding out. I'm still getting letters of interest. So I haven't gotten that done yet, but it is very much on my radar. Parents and kids are required to provide their own spending money, and we will have most of the lunches are on your own, gives them a chance to try out what they'd like to try out. And that cost can vary massively depending on the kid, depending on the parents. I will be going to a supermarket just straight off the bat because I know what I want to eat, and I'm going to load up. One advantage we have is right now the dollar is like at a decade-long high against the euro. It's incredible. It's always hung out about 1.3 and down to a 1.8 today. So that should help a little bit with spending money. They'll have to provide some tips, about $10 a day, and then anything they need to get their passport and visa. Those are just the upfront costs to the parents. You can see the provided by the company, everything you get page, and then the scary pricing page. The total of the trip is $3,255 per student. That's actually down a bit from what it was because I got them to switch it to Milwaukee, which from Minneapolis saves us a lot of time and managed to drop the price a little bit. Comes out to about $316 a month. There is an adult fee, and people have asked, do I want adults on the trip? And right now, Becky's had lots of success with parents and adults on the trip. I'm open to it. It's going to kind of depend on how many, where our cutoffs are for chaperones. How many people we need to get to the next chaperone, or will we go past that? Parents and paid adults would not have any additional responsibilities. They would be treated just like another traveler. The extra cost is $365, and that's because a lot of the places we're going offer discounts for students. And so when the company gets the adult tickets, there is a slight increase. Also, students room up to 4 per room, and adults only 2. So we would pay a little bit more for hotels for them. Any questions on the fees and costs? And this is the point where people get to and they blanch because it's really expensive. But the trip itself, for all the cities we're visiting, the hotels and the bus, isn't bad. The big piece is that plane ticket. I'm taking my 4-year-old in June over to see some friends in Spain, and the best we could get is $1,500. So current interest level, I've talked to all the 7th grade students and sent out an e-blast and just asked people to attend an info meeting or get in touch with me if they were interested. I've also sent out a 6th grade e-blast letting them know that this is coming up, and have gotten back some interest letters from them so far. I've actually got a bunch back today. And really polite parents in general for the ones that couldn't come. I've gotten a lot of, this is really great, and I'm sorry, we're not going to do it yet. For the people that are interested in going, we've had 17 families express interest. 5 people came to my meeting on the 9th. There were 4 or 5 that wanted to come and just couldn't because of the date conflict. I've got another meeting this Thursday. I've got 5 people set up for that, and a couple more that are interested and can't come. So those people that can't come, I'm touching base with on email, and then eventually phone calls if they want to stay with me. And the big question that I anticipate is the high school does trips. They do them every 2 years. Why do we need another trip? And that goes back to some of these students some of the best students I've ever had haven't made it to Spanish 5. And this gives them a very clear goal from the beginning. This is what I want to do. This is why it's important. Anecdotally, that happened to me. I hated Spanish. My dad made me take it. I resented him for it. I was the kid in the back reading his book with his hat down over his eyes because I could. And it was my junior year. We got this option. I went over my senior year and I got hooked. And this is what made the difference. And so hopefully, if 1, 2 kids see that and that keeps them in, it makes doing the whole thing worthwhile. And I also like the idea of a trip that's geared a little bit more towards culture and less towards doing fun touristy things. I think they got lots of options with that here. One thing is this trip is going to be geared more for a younger group. I'm trying to make this as different from the high school trip as I can. I don't want to step on their toes. I know they're concerned that if kids go on my trip, they're not going to go on the high school trip. I'm not sure that that's a valid concern because a lot of high school students that go on one trip will then go on another if they're offered. I know this last Panama trip, they had a lot of repeat students. So what I'm doing differently, there's no family stay. There's going to be, like I said, everybody kind of goes together. It's a pre-packaged trip, so they don't have as much individual time. We'll give them some, like for lunches and stuff, but they're middle schoolers. Yep.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Because it's been lingering in my head
Go.
since you first brought it up. So the kids are going to be able to do whatever they want for lunch, but how are you going to chaperone that?
They get to go where they want within like the plaza. So we'll go to one area, think of it like going to the mall and food court. We're in one area, you've got little cafes and options around, and you go get your food and you come back. And it might be a thing where we go together and we just, okay, who wants to eat there? We go there, and then we go to the next place, and then we go to the next place. Which I know Crier has done a little bit of both, of small groups out and back and doing the whole thing. But it wouldn't be, hey, run the city. But they take us to a very specific place, usually close to where the bus is going to pick us up. And then that's where we have our options to eat.
Any questions for Senior Wood?
Move to approve.
Called him Mr. earlier. Shame
That's
on
all
me.
right.
Shame
Many
on
people
me.
can't pronounce Senor, I just kind of asked for it.
Motion to approve by Peter.
Second.
Hope that wasn't too long-winded. Language teachers talk a lot.
I think it's a, go ahead.
I said, at least it wasn't in Spanish. I followed the conversation.
Yeah, like the French handout, I was like, what? I think it's a great idea, and I applaud you for kind of thinking that vision of why do we not have many kids in our later Spanish classes. I would just add that I think it's something that we need to look at it with the Education Committee as well, because I think it's more than just kids not having the passion to want to do it. I think there's other things involved. For example, at other districts, you can take it and get college credit, and so that's an incentive for some kids. We don't offer that here. So I just think I applaud it, I think it's a great idea, I will vote yes for it, but I think it has to be in concert with other things before we really see that Spanish 5
I agree
roll
with
to the
you.
hilt.
Being in the middle of everything, I don't get to have an opinion, but this is the last thing that I can do to affect that.
Yeah, yeah.
If things go well, would you look at this being a biannual thing or something?
If the stars align, everything works out, and this is something, you know, all the pieces are there, then we would go every other year opposite the high school.
Okay, you know, there's obviously the Paris trip from the middle school every second year. Would you try to somehow do an alignment with that also?
No. I want this to be, I'm a bit, when I'm in a situation that's not necessarily like high stress but that important, I tend to get a little bit more of a control freak. So I would want control
No,
of
I'm just
that.
saying, there may be some kids who, you know, take both Spanish and French and may be interested in attending both trips.
That happens once in a while. We get a few 8th graders that do that. It's maybe 1 or 2 a year. One of the other things with this trip is that hopefully by going opposite the high school trip, if for whatever reason they can't take it in middle school, there'll be 1, if not 2 options for a Spanish trip at the high school. And if they do take it in middle school and want to go again, it will be a different trip. I know that the high school trip tends to focus on Latin, Central America, and I will just go to Spain. Those are my people.
I would like to just commend you for thinking of other ways to engage the students.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
So we have a motion by Peter, seconded by Stephen. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Have fun.
Thank you very much.
9B, consideration of final approval of Bolt Technical Services Agreement.
Right, at the last board meeting, we had their proposal, and it did have kind of a range of prices, and we wanted it broken down. The board requested it be broken down by phase, because there's basically kind of 3 phases to their work. So I did reach out to them. I emailed them and requested that they break it down by phase, and they broke down by hour about how many hours they would spend in each area. And Stephen has seen this already, and so has Scott as well, as far as what their work would look like for that. I did make it clear in their email that we had $3 million total for the project, which includes their their share of it. So when they start looking at specifications that we would send out to get the design build requests in, they have to keep that in mind as well.
So a not to exceed.
Yep, not to
And I
exceed.
think that's something that you guys will want to keep
Yep.
in mind,
Yep.
you know, as that moves forward, is make sure it's a not to exceed, so.
So if I read this, their max then, according to their estimates, is 80,000.
Yeah, yeah. Depending on how many hours in each phase, and it's going to require a certain number of meetings with staff and through the building and figure out exactly what our needs are.
Well, I'll move to approve no more than 80,000.
Second.
Peter, seconded by Leah. Discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to add that, you know, if we approve the not to exceed 80,000, that doesn't mean we have to spend 80,000. Let's say that after the bidding process, you know, we decide, the new board decides that it's not responsive, then you can abort the process there. And so, you know, the whole construction administration would then fall by the wayside. So, you know, there will be some expenses, obviously, you know, the bid specification and the bidding would have been expended, but not the full 80,000.
Which we did clarify with them as well, that the phase 1 and 2, depending on the results of those, may end the project if all the design build bids come in over that. Because they can't really control that part of it, so if all of them come in over 3 million, we're kind of back to where we are now.
Okay. Any other discussion? Questions?
I don't have a item to discuss, but I will say that I'm not going to vote in support of it, only because I feel like we need a long-term plan, and I feel like we're continuing to stopgap where we know. So that's why I'm voting no, just to be transparent about that.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. So we have a motion by Peter, seconded by Leah. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
I oppose.
Okay. 9C, consideration of grant application for AODA abuse, $13,000.
And this is, we're in the 2-year cycle for our AODA grant, so we have to apply to DPI, through DPI to get the money that it's kind of allotted to us, but we have to go through an application process.
And you just need us to approve
Yeah.
the grant
Yep.
submission?
And a lot of the things listed are things we talked about
I'll
at
second.
wellness tonight, in fact, in the grant, so.
Okay, motion by Peter, seconded by me. Any questions?
Yeah.
Stephen?
The total grant funds is 13,000, a
Yeah.
local match of 2,600, so we are actually getting 10,400. What is the total?
No, we get 13,000, but we have to expend internally
So the total amount
2,600.
being spent is 15,600.
Right, right. And we get reimbursed 13, basically. Yep. So we have to guarantee that we will expend at least 2,600
Okay.
towards those items as well.
Other questions?
It's not a question, but it kind of goes back to what Peter said earlier. So there were 2 grant opportunities that I actually forwarded to Teresa that are from DPI that are specific around mental health. At this point, we just don't have the infrastructure to pull that off. I'm glad we have the infrastructure to pull this off, but I want us to be mindful of that as we move forward, to not only think about, for example, additional psych and social work. Social work in particular has come before this board in the past, and we have not, we've approved 0.5, I believe, last year. But thinking through why that 0.5 might be helpful to us, because there are a lot of grant opportunities out there, it's very difficult for us to write a grant based on our current staffing. So there's a...
That brings
It's
up a
actually
good...
interesting. It's interesting you brought that up, because we had that exact conversation about 2.5 years ago. And it was because of the lack of infrastructure, but there were a lot of grants available that trying to push for. So yeah, that's a great.
Yeah, to expand on that, do we need a kind of a point of, someone to lead up in the district to procure grants? You know, there's a lot of grants available out there, And it doesn't seem to me like we have any structure to maximize the number of grants we get, and that's income to the district. So potentially it could add up to, a significant amount of money. But, we don't just want it falling through the cracks because no one's in charge.
We don't have an official, grant writer
That
for the
might be-
district.
Well, might be time to have that
To
conversation.
pick up on
yeah.
something that you said earlier, what about pooling resources among districts to hire a grant writer or to utilize a grant writer or something like that?
Well, at least someone who's responsible to make sure someone writes the grant, because, everyone's going to think, well, someone else is going to do it. Well, that means no one does it.
Well, if I can just interject, I think Teresa has shown that's, an administrator is pretty capable. Now, I don't want to keep that work in your lap if you're like, take it away, but adding a grant writer, I think, is more overhead. Now, if you get somebody that you're going to share resources among people, you can do that, but there's still a cost associated with it. So, Teresa, you wanted to weigh in?
I think my point is seconding what Mary said, is that it's not that we don't have anybody to write the grant. I would have been writing it over the weekend had we had the ability to implement it. One of them had to do with being able to do things related to mental health screening and things like that with kids. We don't have staff that are available to do that. Even just getting the Dane County Youth Survey done every third year, and then now if we're going to add in the Youth Risk Behavior Survey on the Dane County Youth Survey isn't being given, that's a struggle to get done. We don't have enough people within student services, per se, to be able to address mental health needs of kids as they come up, to take the leadership role with the committee within the building. It's an additional responsibility for the administrator. They would have to go to 4 days of training. We would have to have so many days of people coming in to meet with teams of people. We don't even have subs to cover all the teams of people that we need to be involved with, things like that. So when Mary's talking about infrastructure, it's not the grant writing piece of it that we're struggling with in terms of the grants that just came up. It's being able to have the personnel to meet the expectations of the grant.
Right. So I think it speaks to us considering additional social work support potentially, but also, I know there's been conversation about Dean of Students at some point, so it's one thing to screen, it's another thing to serve, and in a few weeks, we're going to look at some of the Wellness Committee talked tonight about the Dane County Youth Survey, and just to give a preview, we need to look at our mental health services, and we need to look at our mental health data. It's, in Teresa's words, if I can quote you, quite alarming. Is that appropriate? And it's a bit of an eye-opener, and I think that we need to be vigilant about that and stay on top of it, so.
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, a couple of years ago, we talked about and discussed at great length a grant writer through Education Committee. And one of the barriers that we have as a school district is many of the grants that are out there for education, we don't have the student body to apply for. Many of them are for free and reduced populations and so on. And the ones that we do, we've been very successful at. Last 2 years in a row, I wrote a grant for $25,000 for educator effectiveness. We received that grant with Verona both years. In other years, we've done stuff for technology. We had a $70,000 grant that I wrote for smart boards a couple of years ago. We were successful with that grant. So it's not necessarily the time, because that's part of our duties. We just make that part of our duties. It's more of the, when we go for that or when we get awarded that, how do we make sure that we can, put the personnel in place and have that piece done. So.
Thank you for your input. Other discussion? Peter? No? Good. Okay, so we have a motion by Peter, seconded by me, to approve. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. 9D, policy first reading.
Okay, and D and E go somewhat together. At the last board meeting, we talked about replacing the director of buildings and grounds. And there was mention that that the board would like some more specific information as far as job duties. So Scott worked on looking at the current position description and changing it to kind of meet more what we would see the role of this person doing. So that's what, it's pretty drastic modification that he worked on. So that's what you have before you in a revision of policy 241.
Questions?
Was there conversation at one point about outsourcing?
Or Peter, one of us mentioned it at our last meeting, the idea of outsourcing.
But there was no further look at what that would mean cost-wise versus position?
Go ahead.
It's kind of a twofold conversation. One was asking whether or not, do we really need to replace a director of groundskeeping, or buildings and coordinators, so that kind of, what I see now is kind of a compromise for that. And then the second part of the conversation was examining, because the list that we got compared to the job description weren't the same. The list they had compared to the job description. So, and then at the same time, there was a conversation that was going on with both Steve and Dan, talking about other areas that we can see that could potentially be a cost savings by being not necessarily outsourced, but contracted out to facilitate that. Or was there stuff that we're currently contracting out that we can bring in-house? So it's kind of a two-way avenue. But yeah, you're correct, there was some very superficial discussion about it.
So it didn't get to the point of saying, what did this mean, dollars?
No.
It sounds like, okay. I didn't get that through the notes, but I wanted to make sure I didn't miss it.
Personally, I think that still warrants some investigation. The other thing that I'll just throw out there, and obviously, well, I don't see this being passed tonight, maybe it will be, but is, I still see this as two different people. Being that, and without me trying to find the exact verbiage in here, experienced construction, maintenance, operations, repair of large buildings, including at least 3 years supervisory experience, I think that's fine. But then the laws and regulations relating to the broad area of school construction and maintenance and facilities and state code. But then, sorry, as I'm looking here, administer safety practice procedures and OSHA, develop, implement, manage budgets, inventory programs, maintain, okay. So I'm just curious if some of that stuff, and also in regard to how the individual would be hired, the requirement that they are certified already, I'd encourage you to look at somebody that maybe they aren't certified, but we'd be willing to invest in getting them certified. Because again, the certifications are going to narrow your applicant pool, I think, significantly. And I'm just throwing it out there, obviously, do what you guys want to do, but you know, if you're willing to invest in those certifications in a highly qualified individual, then easy, you know, have them get the certifications. And the other thing is that, you know, just through conversations I've had with Deb and stuff, is that it sounds like there is a general need or desire to have somebody that's going to manage all the property of the district from a buildings and grounds perspective, ordering product, coordinate resources, things of that nature. So, all that being said, I don't know that I would move forward yet on this, just because, again, can dollars be saved by outsourcing? And also, is this indeed the job description that you want? I don't know if that makes sense.
We
but-
can't pass it tonight anyway, since Jeff's not here, because it's first reading.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, good point. So, it sounds like there is a need for this individual. Is it going to be exactly this? I don't know, but other thoughts?
So Scott, you met with the maintenance staff, is that right? Did I read that in minutes somewhere?
I began meeting with the head custodians and the maintenance folks the week prior to Gary going on his leave. And so, Gordy's
here.
What I've done is I've met with each building once a week. So Monday, I meet with the LCPC. Tuesday, I meet with Gordy, and so on throughout the week. And what I'm trying to do is work with them to troubleshoot how we can get through over the next couple of months. Really thinking short term. I mean, certainly the conversations and the information that they've shared with me, we can take and use long term. But what I've learned over the last couple of weeks is the information that they've been able to share with me, I'm trying to, along with them, find a means in which to get through the end of the school year and get through the end of June, and simultaneously to working on the short term, the short window time frame is, how do we get through long term? What will our summer projects look like? What will the start of our new school year look like? My thought is, in whatever capacity we were to replace this position, I'm certainly getting a lot of information from these folks that can help us in terms of what our expectations are for this position, as well as what are the things that we need to do to get better in what we do. And I hope from Gordy's perspective, it's at least been valuable for the last couple of weeks to at least have those conversations.
So would you like this to be, I don't know, for lack of a better word, fast-tracked? Do you want us to look at it next board meeting for approval as a second reading? Or does it make more sense to collect a little more information? Or do you feel like you've collected enough to feel like you could stand behind this job description?
I feel like I've gotten, I wouldn't say I've received enough information to know how we can pursue making the position the right thing for the district. I've gotten enough information from those folks in terms of their experiences and opinions to know that we need to fill the position in some capacity.
Okay. So do you have a sense, is this an administrative position, or is this, we've talked before about having a level, so to speak, of employment where there's directors and then there's just, they're not teaching staff, but they're, for lack of a better word, professionals or what have you, know what I mean? Like, well, coordinator maybe is the word, since that's what you wrote on the thing. Is that your feeling?
From my perspective, being that this position and whatever its title is called would be reporting to me, what we do need, we heavily need somebody that can work with the head custodians, supervise the head custodians, evaluate the head custodians, but also be a significant resource for head custodians in terms of employee relationships. And we need somebody that can be a leader in this department. I think they're eagerly seeking somebody that can be a leader for them. It's probably the best way I can summarize it.
That's helpful, thank you.
Okay.
So, if I may.
Of course.
I like Scott's argument. I'm still not convinced 100% one way or the other whether we need to fill the role or not, but I acknowledge all that what could be of it. So, if we do fill a role like this, really two-pronged. Well, and in full transparency, I did actually have somebody contact me interested in the job. So what I told him was just exactly what I had said. This may be a prime opportunity to empower more of our head custodians and more of our custodial and maintenance staff to have more opportunities and more outcomes. And there might be a prime opportunity as well to not limit ourselves to filling the role from somebody traditionally part of the school system. I didn't see anywhere in there that that's a prerequisite, but maybe opening it up for people who can think a little bit differently and bring some of those traits and talents that you have mentioned too. I like the work that you did this. It really cleaned it up a lot and matches more what was listed in the previous document that was sent. So.
One thing I'm going to throw out there, and I'm not saying this to have any of our principals in attendance to start throwing things at me, but it seems to me that in the past, there was a time where head custodians actually reported to building principals. Building principals are there every day. They have a finger on the pulse. And it tightens that relationship. Just food for thought, whether or not that's a direction to go. It, again, changes the scope of how all this would be put together. But I don't know, maybe that would be very beneficial, and maybe the principals aren't gonna throw things at me. There's only 2 of them here, 3 of them here that I see, so, but maybe that's something they'd welcome, I don't know.
Because when I
Food
read.
for thought.
Exactly, and when I read this job description now that we've talked about, it's more in lines with what I would see this managerial tool. It really lines up well with what our goals would be, or at least what I would think they would be for maintenance or projects.
So for our next meeting, what would you guys like to see?
Well, if I heard Scott, or to paraphrase him, and Mary used the word fast tracking, but it seems like we would want somebody up and running by the time that resignation expires. So is that June 30th?
June 30th. So is there still interest in having somebody look at grounds maintenance outside of somebody hired by the district? I don't know that we closed the loop on that conversation. Mary brought that up again.
Just that superficial conversation we had last time, nothing of in-depth.
So is that something that you would like to see for your next meeting? Is some estimated costs by companies that offer those services? If not, fine. It's one of those things that was brought up that we never closed the loop on.
Well, don't we have staff that currently do those jobs?
We're really understaffed, is my understanding. And we had volunteers mowing the grounds last year with push mowers, as I recall.
We have one full-time grounds person, and then we kind of piecemeal in the summer with some additional people to add some time to get some of the mowing done.
And so I believe that individual could very easily be retasked with other responsibilities.
We also have some significant possible equipment needs for groundskeeping.
We need one more, yeah.
Like I said, I'd like to see a cost benefits analysis. Is it cheaper to hire another groundskeeper, or is it cheaper to hire a company?
Service.
Yeah.
There's probably several.
Yeah.
Groundskeeper, or lawn isn't just one of them, there's probably several other ones that could be.
Don't we store somebody's equipment on our property?
Yes,
Peter.
You had to go there.
So I thought that, sorry,
We
I thought
store-
part of the reason we do that is because we get some sort of deal.
That's just plowing.
But
in the
we don't.
winter.
Just, yeah.
That's just
Yeah,
convenient.
it's gone now, because it's only for winter.
But is
We
that
don't.
an option?
It is an option, and as a matter of fact, the number I threw out last year is according to the storage, policy 830, $98,000 in free storage we gave that individual for all his plowing equipment.
I mean, I don't have a problem storing lawnmowers if it's going to save us $90,000.
Well, it won't though. I mean, the snowplow contract was $12,000. So if we were to implement those type of fees, you're never going to have somebody doing it. So you're going to be hiring people and doing snow removal yourself.
But I think Warren's asking questions about what services could benefit,
Right, I mean-
either sending them out, or what services do we currently send out that if we had somebody in to lead this sort of operation, that we could bring back internal, or, like you said, retask people who have different skills.
Sure.
I mean, it's a perfect example, right, of, well, we've always done it this way, right? We've always had the director mowing the lawn in the summer, as I understand it.
Yeah.
Seems to me like maybe this is a time to think about, we also have a bus garage that people have expressed interest in having us in some sort of cooperative way, be able to work with them, because there's some, so maybe they store their property or their mowers there and in exchange. I don't know. I mean, I just think it's maybe an opportunity for us to be a little creative about how our grounds can be kept.
And it goes back to what you had brought up earlier about revenue streams, and that this isn't necessarily a revenue stream, but it could change how our expenses look and consolidate those expenses.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure as we're thinking about this, that we're also thinking about the time of the people that we'd be adding to.
Right.
If we decide to, just say for instance, what you had mentioned about the principals, and had custodians and Scott for another, I think he told me he spent 3 hours looking at the turf, 1 week, and, that's kind of a long time for our finance guy to be out there looking at the turf, so, just so long as we're respecting
Sure.
our employees and their time and the other things that they need to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm on board with the whole principal supervising janitors, but I am on
Just
board with this.
throwing it out there.
Yeah, I'm on board with thinking about perhaps mowing being contracted out, if that's something, and I guess I would also, I mean, I'm also not in favor of contracting out janitorial service, which many districts have done. I'm not in favor of that either, but to be fully transparent, I'm not sure that we want to hire somebody and pay them at what would be akin to an administrator salary to have them mowing the lawn in the summer. I mean, to me, that just is like that, because that's what we've always done, and it was my understanding that that's what has happened in the past. Maybe I'm wrong, but that doesn't seem appropriate.
Right.
Yeah.
You're paying them to be an administrator.
Right. We were paying them to be an administrator, but they were mowing the lawn. And to me, I mean, we all have to do things we don't want to do. I've been paid to walk with a garbage can in front of a kid too, but the reality is, if we can head that off at the pass, it seems like that would make sense. This is the time to do it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, as far as looking at contract services, I agree. The janitorial, I would, you know, for what it's worth, I wouldn't be in favor of that. And I think you learn a lot of instances where that hasn't worked when you go to the state convention and talk to other districts that contract services for janitorial services is general, sounds like more of a miss than a hit, so. Okay, so I don't honestly know where that leaves us for future agenda items or future conversations.
I think it's a balance. I think we want to meet the goals of filling a spot, but yet not go too fast where we miss some of these opportunities. So I'm not in favor of posting it or hiring anybody until we've had some of those questions either asked or answered.
Well, would it be possible, and just throwing it out there because I think Scott would appreciate keeping this moving, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but is if you were able to button down the description to where the description is acceptable, and at least get that posted, and obviously that just to start to get some applicants, and you don't have to fill the position, and the description could change, but at least that way you're not losing time.
We still can't fill it tonight because we don't have a full board and it's listed as first reading.
Well, no, I think just on tonight, there's still some cleanup to do, and yeah, at your next meeting, you guys would at least be able to approve the advertising of the position. And then that way, at least you're getting some applicants put together, and as this gets more fleshed out and you feel more comfortable with it, then you have people that you could hire if that's the direction you want to go. Just throwing it out there again.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. I think we should do that. I think we should put it on the agenda for next time, because I do think that we're losing a lot of applicants right now. This is the time to hire. So I think it makes sense to put it on, and we'll, you know, who mows the lawn can be decided along the way. I don't think we should hold it up because of that one little detail. So I would agree and support we put it on for next time.
Well, the one question I have with that is, and I don't want us to get, we're losing a lot of applicants because it's in that traditional school posting system. I don't think this is a job that has to be filled from that pool of people.
Which is why I said, don't worry about the certifications. Find a qualified applicant and train him or her. You know, it just.
But I want us to remember, this isn't a job that has to have. It could come from it, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have to.
Right.
But we are, you know, we're kind of looking at this summer because that's when we have the opening, so.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that, but I think the pool of applicants, we shouldn't narrow it down to believe it's only anybody in the weekend system or whatever rubric that's.
I think in our district updates, you listed like, I don't know, 4
We
or
had
5
some other
places you were going to try
locations
to
that we were
list it.
going to,
The only one that was not public education related was local newspapers. The other 3, I think, were all public education outlets. And so I would look at, I don't honestly know where you advertise for that skill set. I don't know if it's still monster.com or.
Jobs Wanted Madison.
Whatever.
Craigslist.
Yeah.
I mean.
But.
There's just a general Wisconsin government one too, which wouldn't necessarily be school, I think. So, because that would.
With jobs.
Yeah, that would be more, a little more open.
Yeah.
But
And
there's
that
also going to be, you know, facilities management. You know, any large company has facilities managers. So there's going to be, in the private sector, there's going to be a lot of people out there, you know, who would fulfill our needs on that. So we want to make sure we advertise appropriately to get that applicant.
Wish Jobs, though, would also be a good place because you've got a lot of building and grounds people within the state that might be interested in coming here, too.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
I just have one last question. Can we also just get some information about what this would mean, bottom line dollars? Is this going to be cost neutral? Is this going to save us money compared to where we were? Or do we have a sense of what salary range you're going to offer? Or, I just don't have any idea what the thoughts are behind. I mean, it's a pretty radically different job, so I could see it being a radically different pay scale. And I guess I'd like to know that before moving forward, given what our budget is looking like these days.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that
All
okay?
right.
Is that a fair ask? Okay.
9F, consideration of administrative structure at the high school.
I did contact a number of our conference schools, actually all the schools in our Badger Conference, which are comparable in size to us, especially at the high school level. That's how we get put in a conference. So they are very similar in size. As far as what administrative structure that they are currently operating under, not that that's the best one necessarily, but the most common structure, as you can imagine, which I actually have the emails from them if you want to look at kind of some of the schools, is that they have a principal and then either one or two assistant principals and then an athletic or activities director. So very similar to what we are currently doing. There are two districts that responded, Portage and Monona Grove, that have a principal, an assistant principal, a dean of students, and an activity and athletic director. So those two actually have 4 administrative positions because they do have an assistant principal and a dean of students in those two districts. So I guess my recommendation is that we need at least 2 people that do have a principal's license, because only a person with a principal's license can do the teaching evaluations. So if they don't have that license, they aren't able to complete those evaluations, which would be a terrible hardship if we only had one person in the whole building that could do evaluations, teacher evaluations.
Can you clarify, did, most of these have an AD, did, they also do evaluations, correct? If
they do have a principal's license. Some, and you can see, some of them reported that their athletic or activities director was also licensed as a principal, and some they did not have. So, but if they do have a principal's license, they can do evaluations.
And it could be a principal license or just an admin license, right? I mean, as long as their educator effectiveness, if they've passed their educator effectiveness, they can do it, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that they have to be a principal license. They could be from a lot of, or they do. You think they have to be?
License or curriculum instruction.
Yeah.
Would be the only, unless you're evaluating student services.
Yeah, like, so Teresa can evaluate student services staff, but otherwise you need to have a curriculum or principal or superintendent's license to evaluate.
Because I thought you just have to get your educator effectiveness cert. You don't have to have the license.
To get certified.
Right, but I didn't know it was specific to principal, curriculum director, SPED director. I thought any admin license and your educator effectiveness. You see what I'm saying? Like, you could technically be a, right? So any admin license could be SPED director, CNI. It's not like you have to be a CNI director and you can only then do teachers. Like, you can have any admin license and your EE certification. Is that correct? So what you're saying is we could hire an AD with an admin license. Any admin license could do evals.
A principal, student services, or director of instruction license. So that they have to have one of those 3 and then be an AD.
But they could have a student services director license. Yeah. But we definitely need more than one person in the building that is licensed so that they could do it. Right, Stephanie?
I don't disagree with your last sentence, but you actually used an interesting word in there that I think there's another model, and I have a paper here, a research paper, when doing preparation for this kind of talk a little bit. There's another model that looked at 2 co-principals. instead of the traditional principal and assistant principal, which the interesting part in the research paper and several of the other papers talks about playing to each other's strengths as well as increasing job satisfaction, staff morale. One focusing on curriculum or another one focusing on discipline and behavior problems, but both having principal licenses. Maybe another avenue to go as well. So
Actually, several of the districts, I think Wanakee is one, several of them have 2 assistant principals, and they've actually divided up the duties. If you look at, there's emails that relate to that. So one of the assistant principals might be more curriculum strength, and the other might be more student services strength. So that does happen in some.
Right, that's at the assistant level, but this actually is an argument, actually a model now for a lot of school districts looking at co-principals. Maybe something or warranted discussion about the way we really view or look at the structure. And then whether you have a co-curricular activities director who can run just that program, or you have a dean of students to handle some of the other ones. But the Badger 10 really has limited us to our traditionalism, what we've always done. And this is very interesting read with some very good outcomes and numbers.
We'd probably have to pay more for a principal than an assistant. I mean, normally we pay our principals more than an assistant principal.
I'm not arguing that. I'm just arguing that maybe it's time to think about things a little bit differently. Or you save money on, if you have a co-curricular director, that's all they focus on, and they don't have the additional roles or responsibilities. The offset or the expense may be saved on that portion as well.
I mean, the first sentence, and I haven't read the whole thing, this is the first time seeing it, just says, increasing demands imposed on those serving as principals. There's been a call for restructuring because of the increased demands. And if you look at the number of principals and the turnover just in our area, it's very high. Because it's a hard job, A, but also B, educator effectiveness, I think, was a little bit of a tipping point for a lot of people. It's not an easy gig, so it's a different way of thinking about it. I have a question about how many educator effectiveness evaluations are done each year in our district?
Well, we've kind of tried to divide up our staff over 3-year
Thirds.
period. Yeah.
So you have a third. And how
Yeah.
many does that mean this, and plus you have to do new people, right?
Yeah.
So you do a certain
Yeah.
portion. How many was that this year for the high school, and how many are actually completed because of the lack of staffing that we've had?
I will get them all done. I think I took all of Stephanie's, except for one, gave Mike one extra. So he's probably got 4 or 5. I don't have exact numbers without looking at my sheet. I probably have 14 to 16, something like that. And then all of the second year people have to have 1 round. So all the this year people need to have a full evaluation and 3 mini evaluations. And next year's people all need to have 1 mini observation. For me, that comes to 70 mini observations.
And how long are mini observations?
15 to 20 minutes, plus all the typing into TeachScape, and also all the meetings that you have to have.
Do you have to meet with the mini observations for next year too?
Yeah, you're supposed to have a follow-up meeting after the mini observation.
And we were able to complete all of those despite the staffing shortage, the
I'm not
halftime?
done yet.
Okay.
I have all my done. I have a handful of next year's people done with their minis, and I have a lot more to go. I spend a tremendous amount of time in TeachScape and observations, and when I'm not doing that, I'm preparing for all these new rounds of assessments, which consume hours of our time right now. So it's assessment and observation, that's what I spend the majority of my time on these days.
Do guidance counselors help at all with that? You're talking ACT Aspire, which is next week.
Yeah, but like Mr. Clark right now is doing all the AP testing. So he can't help me with Aspire if he's taking care of the weeks of AP testing. The window was poorly planned. There's just so much going on right now that they're both completely full. Their plates are full too. So it has to be done.
And Christine Parnley, as our tag director, only does elementary and middle, I assume?
Yeah, she
Based
would-
on that? She wouldn't do AP testing at the high school? So there's nobody who does advanced learners or tag type stuff at the high school? Is that right?
Not for assessment.
Or not in general? Because, I mean, it would seem to me like somebody would be responsible for doing advanced learner. That'd be AP testing, that would be ensuring kids are getting their needs met, just like Christine does.
She only does a portion of that, with like scheduling and making sure.
She would have meetings with us.
But not direct service, okay?
You can keep it and send it
Oh,
out.
okay.
Send it out, yeah, if you want, or it's
Okay.
up to you.
And how many guidance counselors are there at the high school? Sorry.
2,
Mr. Clark and,
Ms. Kittleson, Satish Kittleson.
and they don't do, neither one of them do any Aspire ACT testing?
Yeah. I mean,
They do
Clark
some.
helps me with ACT, but right now he can't help me because of AP testing. Satish did all the WKCE stuff in the fall, and they're both doing all, I mean, I'd have to give you the whole list.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm trying to wrap my head around, since we're talking about a different structure, what it is that each job really does. And it seems like it's changed a lot from both just the one sentence I read there, from the one piece of, the one sentence I read, but also just in general knowing, like ACT and Aspire is now out, right? AP placement testing. I mean, educator effectiveness. Like, your job description probably has none of that stuff in it at all, or has nothing. And I'm guessing Mr. Clark and Ms. Kittleson's doesn't either. And so, as it seems to me like this is a time where we might want to think about whose responsibility that is. And if it's not the right fit for them, or they don't see their role as being that, then, or we need to think of a different position or something, this would be the time to do it, right? Instead of just doing what we've always done. So I appreciate you taking the time to share that with me, because it's done, I know ACT and Aspire will take days to do. I know AP testing takes days to do. And we don't have the infrastructure to do that, so I think we have to think about that. And which is why I think Dean of Students was kind of one idea that was thrown on the table to help with some of those things. Educator effectiveness is huge, absolutely, for AP, but, so thank you.
And we actually have telephone screening interviews set up for tomorrow for principal position, assistant principal position at the high school, just because, as I shared in the fall, I mean, this is really the time. July 1 is the start of a new administrative contract, so if people are looking now, if they want to make a move or make any changes in their current position. So it's kind of crucial that we get going on this. Because of that, we'll lose our best candidates for those
How many
positions.
applicants do you have right now?
39. But we're doing basic telephone screening interviews tomorrow, just to kind of narrow it down so we can see who to interview. Some of it, depending on where we're going with that, might depend on what qualifications some of the candidates have. Some have different strengths in different areas. But I think it is essential that on both of these, because those are positions that people are, if they're going to take a new position, are looking now.
There's also people leaving positions, so
Yeah.
the candidate pool is getting also bigger.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
the big
Oh, yeah.
shuffle,
There's a
right?
lot of movement right
It's a
now.
lot of shuffling around.
Across administrative positions right now.
So the crazies has started.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Where does that leave us? What was the
Yes.
outcome of this
I guess we need
conversation?
some direction as far as, what the board, where we're going with administrative structure at the high school.
Well, from what I've heard, it's been a lot of questions about the structure, but really the recommendation coming back from you on what should be done is kind of what I've heard. A lot of food for thought, but I think there's been a lot of that tonight, just to make sure that, we're thinking outside the box and not necessarily how it was done historically, but really, I think that's the next step, is to have you come back and say, this is the way it's going to be the most effective for us.
Okay.
Good? Okay. 9G, consideration of co-curricular hiring and employment guideline.
And this was in our last board meeting as well, and there was some request to have a clarification on page 2, which was the evaluation at the top of page 2, because it was a little fuzzy on who was evaluating kind of whom, I guess. And so Chris added that clarification as far as who would be evaluating the assistant coaches during that time period.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mary. Second. Thank you, Stephen. Any discussion?
Yeah, on page 2, the evaluation, it says athletic coaches will be evaluated annually by the athletic director. But I really don't see any objective criteria in here about what does that really mean.
Well, I think it's the 1, 2, 3, 4 down below that, isn't it?
Well,
Some of
okay,
it, yeah,
but
some of it feeds into that.
what does that mean? An individual's experience with a particular activity. Input received from participants and parents. Well, that's all subjective stuff, input. I don't see any objective criteria.
We actually have an evaluation form as well, which that would be used.
It should be attached to the policy then.
It's not actually a policy, it's just our
Well,
guidelines.
it should be
Yeah.
attached.
Yeah.
An attachment.
Yeah. Because it would just be using the same form we have currently.
I don't know how much actual detail for, the reviews that you'd want as a part of the policy, but if you had it as an appendices.
And that's fine, I just want to make sure that, when the evaluation comes back, it's objectively defendable, and it's not just, well, we feel like he did a good job, or we don't feel like he did a good job. There should be facts backing that up.
Sure. Okay.
We'll include the evaluation form on
I'd like to
guidelines.
recommend that we take out the wording underneath clinics and attendance at state tournament. I don't think we have that in any of our other policies that say specifically we're going to pay for example, it would be akin to saying a principal will attend their, administrator conference. We don't have that in any of our other policies to my knowledge, so I'm not sure why we're including it here. And I think that's dependent on whether or not we have the funding to be able to do it. So by putting it in the policy and saying head coaches may attend sports tournaments with mileage expenses paid at the discretion of the district, says that we just say, yep, go ahead and go, and it may be that we don't have the funding to do that at the time. And again, it just doesn't line up with what the others are doing. Right now, we have that funding, and I support it, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. I'm saying I don't want it stated in the policy as said.
Are you withdrawing your motion?
Yeah, I'm making that adjustment. So I withdraw my motion, because I want to make a change
Okay.
on those two pieces.
Well,
I'm confused.
so you can, Robert's rules, you can make the motion,
Mhm.
and then if you wish, you can make a second one that would be secondary to this, eliminate that section with a second. We would vote on just that particular motion, and then the broader one.
Or you can withdraw your motion, and we can start over. But yes, Peter's spot on. If you wanted to make that as a motion with that change, then yes, we would vote on that first. And
So
then
I
we would
withdraw
vote.
my first motion,
Okay.
okay? And I'll make a second motion, which will be to approve it with the last two pieces, the clinics and the attendance at state tournament stricken.
I gotta look at what number that is.
Can you tell me where that is, so I can get the motion correct?
Page,
It's on the bottom of page 3, the last two sections.
Of the
Oh, on
packet.
your page, okay.
Sorry, in our pack. Oh.
It's page 3 of the.
At the bottom of
Yes,
page
bottom
3,
three at the bottom.
those last two sections.
Thank you.
It's on page 56.
And it's the part after clinics and the part after attendance at state competition.
So you, Move to approve, but remove clinics language and attendance at state tournament language. I'll second that.
Okay. All right, any further discussion?
Yeah, so under the clinics part, it says right away, contingent on funding. So I guess I don't understand what the harm is in having it in there. And then attendance at state tournaments, does that apply to state tournaments that we're competing in? Or just the tournament, we didn't make it, but the coach goes?
That's,
Just need clarification.
traditionally, we've sent people to tournaments in Green Bay, even though we have nobody in that tournament, because it's good for coaches to watch that level of competition. So in terms of the clinics piece, I agree that it says it first, but then the second part of it kind of negates it, because it says, may attend clinics or workshops at the expense of the district. So it says contingent on funding, they may attend clinics at the expense of the district. So kind of, to me, it was unclear. So I just would like to strike both of them for the reasons of the clinics. Again, I would support coaches attending both of them right now because we have the funding to be able to do so. However, that being said, we don't put that in for any other administrators or any other job description. We don't say principals can attend their administrative conference, which happens once a year. If they ask to attend that and we have the funds to do it, then we do that. So I think putting it in there kind of implies automatic pass and go, and I'd like to just have it not be stated.
Well, this, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is not a policy. It is more of like a procedure. It's guidelines and such. So it is different than if we were to write a policy on it. So if they aren't in there, then how do you deal with those? Is it case-by-case basis, and then is there room for, well, this person gets to go, but this person doesn't, because we don't have any procedures or anything on it?
Or guidelines.
Or
And it's a
guidelines.
guideline. Guideline implies.
Will, you had something to add?
I just want to advocate on behalf of particularly the head coaches. There aren't a lot of perks for being a head coach. This is one that's very important to them. The knowledge that by being a head coach, the district will send you to the state tournament for the networking, for the observation of how other people do things. It's an important perk to them. And we're not real competitive on salary. And I have a feeling that if we were to ask how many people applied for the head volleyball coaching job, we weren't exactly overwhelmed with applicants. So this would be one more knock against people applying in the future. This is very standard practice in most districts. And I just think you're making what's already proving to be difficult in finding qualified head coaches. This is just going to be one more knock against somebody applying here. So I would just urge a little caution about how you proceed on this based on what it will do to your applicant pool in the future.
And again, I'm not saying they shouldn't go. I'm saying I just don't know that it is something we want to just have an automatic pass. That's all.
And if it's not an automatic pass, what they'll assume is they don't get to go unless somebody just happens to say yes. And that is a lowering of the quality of the package of compensation for those individuals. And you just need to make that decision knowing that you are making it more difficult for us to hire head coaches than it already is.
Mary, can I add just a little history on the money surrounding that? When I came 7 years ago, part of the responsibilities they gave me as the new director was over professional development. And we moved money out of those athletic budgets to secure in a professional development fund $300 for each sport. Now, some of them choose to go to the state tournaments with that money. Some of them choose to go to other clinics. But that money is the only, I guess, earmarked money for anything. In that we know that we have $300 per sport. I work with Mr. Baranek to talk to me about who's going to go and who's not. Sometimes the money's spent, sometimes it's not, but that's the only money that's ever really been earmarked for a certain specific event within professional development, and it's because it came from those athletic budgets back then.
So let me be clear. Every sport gets $300.
Correct.
Every sport.
If they choose it.
So why are we not putting that in here instead of attend the state tournament? So that if I'm the head, gymnastics coach and there's a really good clinic in Iowa and it's $1,200, at least I know I could get $300 and I'd still have to pitch in some money. I understand that, but why wouldn't we be more transparent about that instead of saying going to the state tournament
And
to do it?
you could
Because
word
you're
it
telling me that
That's how
could
we
be.
operate. I mean, that's.
So to me,
exactly
that's
how we
more
operate.
clear. And I'm totally in support of saying a certain amount of money for professional development earmarked. What I'm struggling with is almost the constriction that this makes, that you have to go to the state tournament, or you have to do so that's all I'm saying.
I just wanted to give you history.
I think it would be
has
great
stay
to
that
say
way.
there's a certain amount of money for professional development each year defined by budget, and that coaches have access to be able to seek professional development. I think that's a great idea. More so than this.
Well, I think it's important that, not just for development of our coaches, that we send them to state tournaments, whatever it might be for the sport, but also for our visibility. You know, it's not just people go there to compete, it's also you meet the other coaches and stuff like that. And part of, coaching is also the networking in there. So, I think it's important that we be able to send, especially the head coaches to us.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to the clinics and the attendance at state tournament, just because the clinics, as written, the second after the comma, I understand the concern over how it's worded, but I mean, it's a comma, not a period, so, contingent on funding and approval from the AD or principal, sorry.
That's okay.
You know what I'm saying, though?
Senior Wood would be so proud right now, your grammar.
So, I don't see a problem with clinics personally, and then the attendance at state tournament, it does say that mileage expenses paid at the discretion of the district for the amount of money we're talking about. I mean, it's going to be within the state, and it's at the discretion of the district. And hopefully, if budgets are that bad, we're having conversations with people,
The one thing that's not clear, though, it says for assistant coaches may request attend using personal days. Head coaches may attend, that means we're paying for them to attend. They're not using personal days, is that correct?
Head coaches, yes.
Okay.
Yep. But if it used to be that assistant coaches had more flexibility in attending, but now it actually spells out that if they want to attend,
So the
they
only
have
thing
to
where we're
take.
kind of on the hook is, according to this, the mileage is at our discretion. But giving the paid day to go up there is not, according to this.
Right.
So there is.
So we pay for a sub.
Yes.
And we pay for mileage.
No, that's at our discretion.
That's at our discretion.
The mileage is that.
But if I'm correct, it's $300 they have. They could travel to Madison, get a hotel room, and we'd be okay with that because we're giving, obviously that's discretion. Let me use a different example. They could go to Green Bay, and I'm saying I would support this. They would go to Green Bay, they would pay for a hotel room, we'd pay for their mileage, they'd get a sub for the day as a head volleyball coach. I think that's where, or basketball, girls' basketball is in Green Bay, right? And that would be okay. And I'm not saying that it's, I actually think we should say that, so.
Other than the day and the registration for the event, the rest of it's at discretion.
Is all at discretion.
And many times we make them pay for their own food or their mileage, and they're happy to. And we don't always have the money to cover that because we try to stick to that $300
Yeah.
per sport. So
I just think we should put $300 down
If
instead.
you're telling me we have to operate differently or think about operating differently, we could. Just because that's what history has done, that doesn't mean anything. But oftentimes I have to tell a coach, if this is, this is what you have to spend. If you want to have that pay for your registration and your assistant coaches, then fine, but meals are on your own and gas is on your own and room is on your own or whatever that is. Because we've always tried to stick to that, what they've had.
Professional development opportunities are available to those who seek it within budgetary constraints on a regular basis, limited to $300 per sport or something like that.
Well, then I think we should definitely reword it, because nowhere in here do we talk about hotel, right? Or the registration fees. All we say is that we may or may not reimburse mileage. It's not even really clear that we pay, for their day off, that they don't have to use personal time. So maybe it just needs to be rewritten. To just talk about personal development, like you said.
I hear what Will is saying, and I completely agree. I mean, they're making probably less than board members make. But that being said, we need to clear it up and make it very clear so that it's equitable. So it's not just something that's happening for certain sports because they happen to know about the $300 bonus. Or necessarily that's even the right training. There might be a coach out there who really wants to know about the newest way to judge gymnastics because there's some new rules coming down the pike. I have no idea, right? And then it would make sense that they would go to perhaps a training on that. So I guess I would just advocate for that.
And I think if we rewrite it, it's making it more open. Right now, this is really restrictive.
Yeah.
We may or may not pay for your mileage. That's all it says.
Mhm.
So I think if we can write it more to be personal development up to not to exceed.
And kind of combine those two sections into more.
Okay, so right now, we have a motion by Mary, seconded by Peter to approve.
I withdraw my motion again. I think we should edit it before we approve it. Can I do that? I'll withdraw my motion again. I want to
can.
edit it. Are you okay
Okay.
with withdrawing your second?
What if he doesn't withdraw his second? What happens then?
You'd have
By
to
rules, we
make a
should have
motion.
voted no on both of them, but.
Right.
That way, that's what Mary, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so no motion, or does anybody care to make a motion?
I would clean it up.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Does that mean we're not bringing this back next time, or?
We are.
Yes, we are
Next
bringing it
time.
back, and with those two kind of combined in a more clarified manner.
All right, rolling right along here. 9H. The consideration of personnel committee work, draft of handbook.
Right, and the handbook is pretty much what it was the last board meeting, except we had a few items that we needed addressed by the board, which were taken care of last time. So if you, and I know you guys have different page numbers, but handbook page 13 on the handbook, at the bottom of page 13 on the handbook, and the top of page 14 of the handbook, we added the stipend language for staff that are between 20 and 30 hours a week that were getting the HRA, which was very limited in use. So we did address that and put it as a stipend minus FICA and Medicare tax. So there'd be no other cost to the district. So that's on the bottom of 13 to the top of 14. And I guess the other major area was on page 26, the other addition was raising the replacement teacher rate to $20 from $16, which has been incorporated now. Last time, I don't think we had the PI 34 language, but that's exactly as it is in the current handbook, and that's on the top, bottom of 27 at the top of 28, but we just took the same language. It just was not in the last reading, but it's the same language that we have in our current handbook for PI 34. So those are kind of the major things that were not, were kind of addressed at the last board meeting that have now been incorporated. But otherwise, I think it's pretty much the same. It might be a little more organized now, but it's pretty much the same as it was, except those changes.
Silence.
School calendar is in here. Has that been approved yet?
The calendar we did a 2-year calendar. We will be bringing back, we're actually working on a 16-17 calendar. I met with the calendar committee last week.
That's right, I remember there's a committee.
Calendar committee.
I remember that.
Yeah, so we are actually working on a 16-17 calendar, but we will bring the 15-16 with every exact date in it to the
Because it was
board.
really a shell.
Right, it had the breaks, the major things like that in it, but, yeah. We'll bring that when we bring the 16-17, which probably, it might even be at the next meeting. Probably, if not then, the last meeting in May.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Can I ask for really one lame request?
Yeah.
It's really lame, but can we put a line above where the page numbers are? Because as I'm scrolling, I'm losing my page numbers. I know it doesn't matter once we print it, but like, it's getting caught up with where and I'm like, you're like page 26, and I'm like, I can't find it because it goes 1, 2, 3, 5. I'm like, I don't know where I am. It's really lame. Just
Okay. Anyone else? Deborah, are you looking for a motion on this?
Yes, this is our second reading and everything has
Motion
pretty
to
much-
approve.
Second.
Okay. Leah, seconded by Diana.
We're still meeting though that one day to talk about the other.
The 6th, that's for the compensation model, which we just referred to in here,
Right.
that still needs to be completed. Yep,
And is that
that's Wednesday, May 6th.
5:30?
Yep, 5. I think you said 5.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah, I didn't remember what the email, there were several replies to the
Yeah.
email, so I don't know where we were.
Okay. Other questions, comments?
Well, there's some things in here that aren't filled out yet. You know, it's like see appendix question mark.
That's because we don't know how the appendixes are gonna be labeled yet, they haven't been put in order yet. So it'll just be A, B, C, D, or E, or, that's how we have them now.
All right, we've got a motion by Leah, seconded by Diana. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Fee structure for use of facilities, policy 830. Now, Mary, this is one we had on our last agenda. You had asked for it, I guess, 4 weeks ago now. So that's why it's on here.
We just moved it
Yeah.
to the next, we tabled it to the meeting that you were going to be at.
That was nice of you guys. I don't remember because it was 4 weeks ago, sorry. Can I back up for just a second and say kudos to those of you who did the handbook. I know it was a ton of work and it's awesome, because I wasn't here to say it last time, so it's great. I mean, it's great in the process that was used. So I think the issue with or the reason that I asked for it was just to make sure that we were equitably charging people, if I remember correctly, because there was some question about whether or not certain clubs were being charged or not. And I'm not sure that this necessarily, so for example, I'm just going to look at the policy fast. What defines, I'll use speed and conditioning. Like, is that a club that is run by, I think it's run by our Gridiron Club, looking at somebody who's a football player, right?
He's not playing anymore, but yes, I'm pretty sure Strength and Speed is run by the Gridiron Club.
It's run by the Gridiron Club, so then do they pay the gym amount or do they not pay the gym amount?
I don't know.
And I think that has varied. I will have to look at it for sure, but, and one of the things I think this came up was because the village rec department currently pays us they pay us $5 per adult member for use, but nothing for student use. So when there's rec department activities going on in our buildings, the school district doesn't receive money from that.
For students?
For student, yeah. So it's only, I think that's kind of where this started because that was brought up, how much do we receive? And it was like, I don't remember, it's now $1,300 maybe for the whole year.
Right, which was
From
good, right?
adult use, yeah.
Because it was unclear if we received any money.
Yeah.
But then we looked at it, we did receive money.
Yes.
But then I think there was another question because it was, so let me understand this, it's a little bit hard for me to, so an adult using our gym, Sunday night open gym, old man basketball as I like to call it, right?
That's the rec department.
That's the rec department, and they
almost
pay.
eligible for that, but
They pay, if Gordy was here, Gordy's
Yeah,
there
he will.
every Sunday.
He's the head of
So,
it.
he's the head of it. They pay $5 a year to use the
Yeah.
gym or something, right? A year?
Well, they pay.
They pay like
the rec
3 times,
department, But
yeah.
the district receives $5 per person using it.
Per year.
Per year. So the rest of
year.
it goes to the village rec department. Yeah.
Right.
Per session.
No,
if
it's
the
a,
program runs a year.
that runs
okay.
all year.
Okay.
If it
So
runs
that-
2
yeah.
months,
Well, nothing
then
of the
it's-
year.
Right.
So, okay.
Old man
Yeah,
basketball.
old man basketball does run all
Okay,
year.
old man basketball.
But they only pay once.
They pay one $5. So that's that. If a kid comes in and plays with them, a student of ours, they don't pay the $5. They
Right.
don't have to pay the $5 because they're covered under the rec.
Right.
If, I don't know, let me think of a sports team in town. Let's say there's an independent lacrosse team that's starting. There was a couple years ago, right? They want to use our gym. Or let's say there's a volleyball group that wants to use our gym. They would pay.
Yes.
Right?
Normally.
And they would pay the $35 if they're residents.
If they're
If
all
from Verona, they would pay $70.
Right.
Okay. I think that's where there was some confusion, because I don't know who is paying and who's not paying, and I don't know that we've been really clear about that. Maybe I'm wrong. So, for example, if the Gridiron Club runs Strength and Speed and is not paying, but parents are paying, they're a nonprofit, then can that parent claim all of that amount because they donated, in theory, to the nonprofit? And that, I don't have the
That I
answer
don't
to
know
it,
either.
but I guess I just want to make sure we're equitably charging everybody so that everyone is treated the same way. And I don't know that we are. I have no idea. But, so that's where my question came from.
I mean, holy smokes, even if we got $1 per kid, because my kids did the basketball camp, there were like 70 kids in that gym. Like, it's kind of crazy to me that they, they use the space and, we're keeping the lights on, and in that case, it's our coaches that are coaching, but we don't see a dime. That's a little bizarre to me.
But the village would say, right, the pushback would be, we use the park, right? We use Sunset Park, we might use Grundle Park for our baseball team, we might use, and I don't know, I should look at Scott. We use Liberty Park probably for some of our facility, and they don't charge us. So it's always been this kind of agreement that.
Do we really use those? Because I have never seen a school functioned activity at Liberty Park or Grundle Park or anything
Yeah, I
like
thought
that.
that was
Except-
usually club.
Yeah, they're usually club. Now, the kids have taken like a field trip picnic to Grundle, and I don't know that we paid the $30 to rent the
shelter.
The shelter, but it wouldn't surprise me if we do. I don't know. But
I don't know, but it would be something that I think we should look at.
But I think if you weighed out the scale for how much they use to what we use, that scale is not an even trade at this point. And if we're talking about where our finances are and, how tight they are, if we're keeping a gym open that we wouldn't normally have open from 9 to noon or whatever for basketball on a Tuesday morning during summer school, when normally they're not in summer school, then we are taking on a cost.
You're talking about the village rec?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know we've had this conversation, I think, every year that I've been on the board, which hasn't been that many years, so.
We always have this conversation
Right.
about the rec department. It's
Right.
fitting that on Dan's last night, we have it.
Would you like to have a cash in the conversation too on the way out?
No, that's okay. So, I'll just, what I had mentioned a couple meetings ago is that for the amount of revenue that we take in from the rec department at $5 per person, I think it was $1,200 last year,
Yeah, it was
rough and
like
tough.
something like that.
It's, before we dissect this too much further, it may be something that a new athletic director could tackle. I totally agree, it should be fair and equitable to all parties. I would not be in favor of, charging the fees for local taxpayers. How do you do that? If you get Tri-County basketball, can it be defined differently? But, I guess before you spend a terrible amount of time trying to figure this out, it may be something that a new athletic director could contribute to.
I think it's a good idea. I just think it's an area that we need to clean a little bit. That's it. I don't think we have a clear policy on who gets what. I think it's a little bit of
Just
whatever.
a definition of how this is executed, because that's what we're lacking. We don't really know who gets charged, who doesn't, et cetera.
Well, Mary said something interesting, who gets what, is actually two-pronged. One is the fees, and two is the third bullet point under the schedule. Because there's certain groups that believe they have a right to certain areas before any other group. So we have to make sure, and every time you have to reinforce really the priority of scheduling those facilities. And I've said it before, but with our rotating field maintenance too, we need to be very proactive instead of reactive to get the information out on which fields are closed.
So what would you guys like to do with 9I?
I think actually waiting until a new AD is hired would be the most.
Okay.
I agree, I think we should wait, but I would add, the locations that are listed actually are gonna need to be updated. I don't see tennis courts out there, and there's a new fitness center. So, I think this just needs to be looked at, totally.
My guess is in about 6 months, the fitness center is going to cause a lot of ire on scheduling. A lot of ire on scheduling.
Well, and that,
There's gonna
if
be a lot
memory
of-
serves me right, district functions get priority.
Yeah.
So,
School building sponsored programs, school district use, other educational programs, and then municipal.
yep.
Right,
And
so
that's
school clubs or organizations, there are groups that use it, that gets put in first. If there's space and time available for other, then it, I mean, like if our National Honor Society needs to use the auditorium for a program, that's
Yeah.
tops, some other group coming in to use it during that time. Because it is a school building, and if our school needs to use it, then that's top priority.
And is that stated clearly in policy 830?
Well,
It's in scheduling
it's in the
facilities.
scheduling.
Bullet point
Yeah,
three.
bullet point 3. I was just reading that too.
On page 2 of 5 of the policy.
Page 58. Okay, packet. Oh, all the way up there, okay. I was knee deep in it here. All right.
And that always takes precedent.
And every year you have to reinforce it, because there's always a new group who thinks they have priority over everyone else.
Dan, you're really smiling.
He's like counting.
Are we all good?
You just
Ready to move on? Sorry, I'm gonna tarnish my record on getting meetings wrapped up early. Anything else on 9I?
You got a record?
Was it a good record?
Well, it's up for debate.
Does it depend on who you ask?
So, anyone?
We're fine.
We're good? Okay. Citizens' comments? Yes.
I have a couple. There's been some comments about lawn issues, and that maybe it's always been the Director of Buildings and Grounds who's been out mowing. That has not been an always thing. That is the person who's just getting done. That's been his thing. The people who were before him did not do that. They had plenty of work to get done that didn't involve that. That was a personal choice that that person made. So I hope that you aren't sort of weighing a lot of big job decisions based on the fact that somebody saw that person mowing the lawn, that person's predecessors did not make that choice. If you're thinking at all about subcontracting lawn services, I'd just be careful about that in terms of how people schedule when they use those fields, because right now, because everything's in-house, there's lots of communication between all the employee groups of the people who take care of it and the people who use it. So even if I walk out and I see somebody out there, I can say, are you remembering that I'm out in an hour? Yep, I'm all good on that. I've planned for you to be here. And there's a lot of good communication that happens because everything is currently in-house. And so if you're thinking of there might be some cost savings that might come at the expense of trying to schedule to actually do stuff. The last thing I would just like to say is, Dan, on behalf of myself, I guess, at this point, thanks. You've served in a very difficult time, thanks to the state legislature. Probably the most contentious potential time that somebody could be a board president. And while I heard from many of my colleagues about situations where things got very strung out on animosity between different subgroups, for whatever reason you chose to continue to have dialogue with various groups, and I think it kept us moving forward, not always happily, not always agreeing, but I think you kind of guided us through some of what could have been a very acrimonious time, and so I just want to say, on behalf of any teacher who would choose to agree with me, thanks for your service, but thanks for your service as president of being willing to have continuous dialogue and not see that as a threat. I think our district's been better served for that, so.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Congratulations on the end of your term.
Thank you. Anyone else?
You can put my name on his comments.
Thank you, Gary. Okay,
Much
any
more
other
open
citizen?
to me.
Other citizens' comments? Okay. Future agenda items, Deb, Jackie, I think you guys kept track of those. Okay. Schedule of next meetings is accurate?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, entertain a motion to adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin Statute 19:8.85, 1C and F, administrative contracts and employee concerns. Peter?
Second.
Diana? Roll call, Stephen?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Diana?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Let's take 5 minutes.